We stand for the true and north, the cities and skylines, the strong and free. For those who value the story and source, the opinion and fact, the context and clarity, to help illuminate the path and potential, the drive and direction. We are the one and only, the Globe and Mail. What shapes your world?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Erin Adams, and I'm the Vice President of Human Resources here at the Globe and Mail. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today, whether you're attending in person or whether you're joining us virtually from across Canada. Welcome. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge that the Globe and Mail's headquarters are situated on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. My colleagues and I are grateful for the opportunity to be able to work and live on this land. And on behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to thank our sponsors, Desjardins, Deloitte, Estellas, PwC, and Sun Life. We truly appreciate you making today's event possible. So today's program is going to bring together people from across the country to recognize the progress that we've already made, but also to recognize that there's work still to be done to make sure that we have meaningful pathways for women in business in Canada. And you're going to hear from an exceptional group of women. They're going to share their insights, their ideas, and their experiences on how we can continue to drive change forward. So at the Globe, supporting women's success is important to us as an employer, as well as a publisher and a Canadian institution. And so we have a number of policies and practices in place to support women, but it's really the women at the Globe that bring that to life. And so I thought it would be helpful to share a bit about some of our stats. So currently 53% of our workforce are women, and women make up 50% of our newsroom and 50% of our executive team. And our people managers, 57% are women. And I think that probably surprises people when you think of the Globe and Mail. You might not think that we are as gender kind of diverse as we are. But that's been a conscious decision and made possible through a number of policies, programs, and for example, we have a mentorship program that's currently in place. 67% of participants are women. And we also have leadership development programs for our high potentials, and we consciously make sure we have equal distribution, representation, and we also have a succession planning process where we actively track gender equity and report on that on an annual basis. We've also introduced a number of policies where we've tried to meet women where they're at. So we have a guide for people that are returning from parental leave to welcome them back into the organization. We also have a menopause policy, and that probably was the most popular HR policy that we've ever introduced. So the bar is a bit low. HR policies aren't super well received usually, but that one was. And we also are very proud of our employee resource group, Empower Her, which brings together women and allies from across the organization. Beyond that, I wanted to just share a quick personal story about the importance of representation. And so when I was first starting my career, late 90s, early 2000s, I was fortunate enough to work in an organization that had equal distribution at the executive level. And it's funny because we actually were highlighted in the Globe and Mail. That company was highlighted in the Globe and Mail. And that article was framed and hung in our CEO's office. And it was about the fact that we had an equal distribution of women at the executive level. Fast forward, I go to a new company, and I'm early on, kind of sitting and having a career conversation with one of my younger staff. And I asked her what she was interested in doing. Was she interested in moving into senior leadership? And her response was she didn't know it was possible because she wanted to get married and have kids. And I was the first female executive that she had seen that had kids. And it had never occurred to me before, because of where I had grown up, that it was even kind of a discussion or something you needed to consider. And so I think it's really important for us to never underestimate the value of what you see and the value of role models in our organizations. So I didn't realize how powerful that was at the time, but I did after the fact. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. So please join me in welcoming Poonam Singh, Vice Chair of Deloitte, to the stage to share some opening remarks. Welcome, Poonam.
Thank you, Erin. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Exciting to see so many women in the room and a handful of men as well. So thank you for joining us today. I am a product of real dichotomy. I grew up in a part of the world where even to date, female feticide and female infanticide are rampant. And yet, due to early intervention of my father and his lifelong support, my sister and I were the first two women in our family that ever went to university, built a career, and actually found success in our respective domains as well. Now, I also moved to this country when I was a 21-year-old without realizing and likely romanticizing in a delusion way what minus 21 felt like, with lots of dreams, sparkles, ambition, with no family in this country, no support system, and yet here I am, a senior partner at Deloitte, the largest consulting firm in the world. And that is, I believe, a real dichotomy. And I think to Erin's commentary as well, in some ways, more than half of our workforce is female in this country. And yet only a third of our executives are represented in that workforce that are actually women. In some ways, in 2026, there is no better time to be a woman. And yet, when you look at some of the data and statistics, I think we would all agree that much progress needs to be made. So you often tend to wonder, is it that women don't strive for the executive roles? Or do we believe that, to some extent, the rules-based system that have existed for so long don't really work for women? So today, we are here to celebrate progress, but we're also here because progress alone is not enough. On behalf of Deloitte Canada, I'm proud to welcome you to Women Lead Here, now in its 7th year and more relevant than ever. I want to thank the Globe and Mail and Report on Business for this particular event. It has become one of the most credible and influential benchmarks for gender diversity in corporate Canada, not because it celebrates intent, but because it creates visibility and accountability. Now, when it comes to women in leadership, I do believe that we are at an inflection point today in society. Not so long ago, the formal DEI programs got questioned. And let's be very honest, for the longest time, that at least in my career, there were always the hushed voices, the water cooler conversations that was about the formality of the DEI programs and whether they were actually needed. But the moment it got questioned, the expediency with which, whether it was silently removed or loudly removed from many corporate organizations, also makes me wonder whether they were performative to begin with, to some extent. Were they actually designed to achieve what we are really here to strive for? And here's where I'm hoping that today's conversation allows us to push us a little bit further. While progress inside traditional systems have been slow, women are not waiting. Women are starting businesses at record rates. One of the data I was actually reading said over 40% of new businesses are actually started by women. Women are building companies to gain flexibility, to gain ownership, to gain long-term wealth, often because the existing systems are simply no longer relevant or suitable for women. To me, this is not a side story. To me, this is a real, true signal. It tells us when the system doesn't move fast enough, women change the system. And this is exactly why Women Lead Here this year matters. Now, by expanding to include Canada's top growing women-led companies, the program now reflects that when leadership is actually happening, not just in boardrooms, but also in founder-led, growth-driven businesses that are shaping Canadian economy. This is women rewriting the rules, not opting out, but actually building something even better. At Deloitte Canada, we see this every day. We work with established organizations and high-growth founders who are navigating complexity, scaling responsibly, and redefining leadership in practice. What consistently holds true is this: organizations with diverse leadership teams make stronger decisions, adapt faster, and build resilience over the long term. I think most of us can actually acknowledge that. Now, our role here today and every day is to actually translate that ambition into action, turning intent into measurable progress. And programs like Women Lead Here are critical because they create momentum where it matters the most. Today is about more than recognition. It's actually about learning what is working, but I'm also hoping it is also about radically challenging what actually is not working. And it's also about having the courage to evolve faster than the systems we inherited. So thank you to Globe and Mail today, to our speakers, to our honorees, to all of you who's actually here to continue this conversation and to push the discussion further. On behalf of Deloitte Canada, I hope that today we challenge, we equip each other, and we inspire each other to lead the change and drive momentum and decisions where it matters the most. And I also hope to every 21-year-old woman, whether you were born here, whether you moved here, that even if you have ambitions, as crazy as they might be, that not only do you wait to get a seat at the table, but you actually set your own table. With that, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? I'm not well because Poonam just took my notes. So I think Poonam needs to bring back the notes. So I know. This is a great way to start, everyone. But this is what happens when we have, bring the notes back. Oh, okay. What about I don't have notes right now, but that's okay. I'm going to freelance this. My name is Dio Kafense. I am your MC for today. Some of you may have figured this out because you've checked it out online. Over time, you're going to figure out a little bit about me. I want to know, though, about you. Part of the sauce of having an event like this is making sure that the audience is part of it. That's part of my style as an MC. There's a lot of action that's going to happen on this stage, but the exciting stuff is your reactions. So I am hopeful. Right now, all of you are looking at me very sullenly, unfortunately. Maybe you're hungry, I'm not sure. But I'm hoping as the day warms up that we are going to get to know each other out when we're having lunch here in this audience, and that we're going to have the exciting and move and push forward conversations that Poonam and Aaron talked about. So I have a little bit of a not game, but a bit of a. I want to hear from you, basically. Is this on? Is this on? Are we on? Can you hear? Oh, my voice is loud. Can you hear me? All right. So I want to kind of get to know who's in the room. I had a chat with the good folks at Astellas, who told me about an exciting product that they have coming up. I had a chat with the folks at Chartwell, who gave me a good indication of what's happening in the world of retirees. And how many of us have retirees in our families? I think the whole room should have their hands up. So those people over there want to talk to you. And how many of us, I shouldn't have said us. Okay, I'll say us. How many of us are dealing with the changes of life as we age? Oh, hands are going up really slowly. I'm going to put my hand up really high. This table over here is interested in talking to you because they have some interesting new innovations. But a little bit about me, because you're going to see me pop up and down off this stage a little bit. You're going to wonder, who am I and how did I get here? So My experience with the Globe and Mail started in 2021. Someone slipped into my DMs and said, actually Sean Stanley, for those who don't know, and said, I think that you might be someone who could help us out in a jam. We have a maternity leave, and you have a bit of an entrepreneurial side to you and a journalistic side to you, and I think it might work. And so I came in as a content strategist with the Globe and Mail, working with the revenue department, because prior to that I had worked at CBC Radio as a producer and on-air person many years ago. I won't tell you how many. It's been a while, but it's been a while ago as a reporter and editor for Metro Morning and Here and Now. So how many of you are connected to that? How many of you either subscribe to the Globe and Mail or listen to CBC Metro Morning? By round of applause, I need energy. Oh, that doesn't sound like a lot of people who subscribe to the Globe and Mail. That's all? Okay. Oh, notes. I think I'm okay. Until I'm not, then I'll come back to you, but thank you. So that's great. So some of you either subscribe to the Globe and Mail or listen to CBC Radio. Excellent. So for those of us who are in Toronto, and I know many of us are watching online, and for those who are online, please also put in the comments. We want to hear from you also and bring your reflections to the day. Some of you who live in Toronto know Yonge Street's a divider, and you're either on the east side or the west side of the line. You either prefer the east, would this be right? Would you agree? You either are east people or west people. So I'm going to say, I'm going to tell you where I live and then you know what side I'm on. I grew up in Mississauga and I live in South Etobicoke. So how many of us feel that west is best? West is best, west is best. Okay. Sorry, east folks. West is best. So then people look at my name and they're like, is she African? You can tell I'm from Canada. I'm born and raised in Toronto. My parents liked African names, so they threw stuff down. But, no, they really did. There's a longer story there, but we'll get into that another time. But my family hails from Barbados. So I had to go in January because this weather is ridiculous. And then I go there often. And then, of course, some of us may know Mia Motley, who is one of the world's most exciting women leaders, since we're talking about women leadership today. So by round of applause, who has either been to Barbados, wants to go to Barbados, or needs to go because of this weather? Okay. And finally, so I'm getting to know all of you, mentorship is important. We heard from Aaron, we heard from Poonam how important mentorship is to our careers. I have a business called Dio Media and Communications. Yes, it's named after me slightly, but it's really, if you know Nigerian, some of you might know Nigerian? You might. Dio is joy returns in Nigerian. So our goal in our business, Dio Media and Communications, is to provide great, joyful, fun, smooth, slick content for folks, supporting businesses, supporting individuals. And part of my mission in my career has been to have mentors. So I mentor people. So just want to know, how many of you have mentors or how many of you mentor? So that's what we're going to hear about through our next guest, Dawn Kelly. Thank you, Fiona. Our next guest, Dawn Kalea, she's the editor of Report on Business, and she's going to talk about what we are here to talk about. Women, leaders, the importance of mentorship, and what is happening in terms of accountability for women in corporate Canada. So I just want to bring Dawn up to the stage. Thank you, and you'll see me later.
Thanks, Dio. I will not be talking about the mentors I have had throughout my career, because early on it was drunk old white dudes. So I'm not sure whether that was a good thing or not. Hello, everyone. I'm Dawn Kalea, editor of Report on Business magazine. Thanks, Dio, and thank you to Aaron and Poonam before that. That was a fantastic way to kick off the day. And I'm thrilled to see all of you here. This is my favorite event of the year. It's not often that I get to address a room full of largely women. And to the men who are here today, I see you and I appreciate you. You are clearly allies, and we need as many of those as we can get these days. And please know that I wrote this speech yesterday in a bit of a fury over the whole end of a civilization waiting game, so bear with me. It is only Artemis that is getting me through, and Crater Carol. My main job this morning is to talk a bit about our annual Women Lead Here benchmark, which I'm sure we can all agree is landing at a strange moment. Not so long ago, it felt as though we were poised for real change. But since January 2025, it seems as though we've regressed by several decades, and not just when it comes to gender parity and DEI, but in so many terrifying ways that it's hard to even know where to start. So instead, I will dive into our Women Lead Here data, which was translated into human speak for us, as usual, by the wonderful Deborah Arts, who's here. Woo, indeed. Deborah led the development of the benchmark 7 years ago to help measure gender parity progress among the top ranks of Canada's women publicly traded companies. As we put it back then, it was a starting point to track future progress. Well, that progress has been somewhat uneven. Back in 2020, 73 companies made the benchmark list, with an average of 44% women in executive roles. This year, 85 companies made the list, compared to 93 last year in the early days of the DEI backlash. But as Deborah writes in our April issue, there are a few faint glimmers of hope buried in the numbers. This year, ROB Magazine analyzed 4,615 executives in the top leadership ranks of this country's 472 largest publicly traded companies. And we found that 6.6% of them have a woman at the top of the pyramid. That's a heartening tick upward from last year's dismal low of 4.7%. Just over a quarter of all leadership roles in corporate Canada are held by women, which brings us to the middle of the pack among the G7. As for the 85 companies that made it onto this year's benchmark, more than half have reached or surpassed gender parity in the boardroom, with an average of 48% women in the executive ranks, including 1/5 of our benchmark CEOs. And if you need financial incentive here, Deborah notes that the average profit margin among our 85 Women Lead Here honorees is 9.5%, more than twice the average of non-winners. This is all extremely good news. There is some bad news, though. Among those 472 publicly traded companies we looked at, more than 22% have a full-on brocracy at the top, which is to say an exclusively male leadership team. Brodeo? There's so many terms we can use. A further 23% have a single woman in a senior position, and just 29% have more women execs than they did a year ago, the lowest in the 7 years of the Women Lead Here ranking. And if you're getting lost in all the percentages here, don't worry. We have copies of the April edition for you to take home. That includes our Women Lead Here benchmark, along with our second annual list of Canada's top growing women-led companies, a list of 44 female-forward businesses ranked by 3-year revenue growth, a list that includes the Food Dudes, our awesome caterer. It also includes a profile of Nancy Southern, the CEO of Atco Limited, which has made our Women Lead Here benchmark every year since 2020. There's also a delightful and gossipy story that got me in trouble with a bunch of billionaire dudes. Just FYI. Give it a read. But back to my remarks. This sloth-like pace of change is troubling, to say the least. According to the World Economic Forum, it will take 134 years to close the global gender parity gap. In terms of parity in the corporate management sphere, estimates range anywhere from 25 years to a century. And things could get worse, on top of the attacks on women's rights we're already seeing right next door. As Deborah notes, McKinsey and LeanIn.org's most recent Women in the Workforce report suggests there's a growing ambition gap between men and women interested in moving up the corporate ladder. 86% for men and just 80% for women. This finding is backed up by the Canadian Prosperity Project's 2025 report card, which shows a stark drop in the share of women in management pipelines at Canada's largest companies, from 55% in 2022 to just over 45% last year. That doesn't mean there aren't companies out there working hard toward gender parity. There are, and that's what we're here to celebrate. Many of you are here today, and your teams, and you deserve all the kudos we have to give. But the fact that more and more women are giving up on advancement is deeply disturbing, to say the least. Can you really blame us, though? The women in this room have all heard the same criticisms over and over again. Not leadership material, too bossy, too passionate, too dowdy, too hot, doesn't smile enough, intimidating, refuses to play office politics. We've been left out of after-work drinks and golf games. We've been skipped over for promotions because we'll probably just run off and have more babies. We've had our ideas stolen with zero credit given. Been expected to run ourselves ragged doing much of the actual work of keeping our organizations going while pretending we don't also have full-time jobs waiting for us at home, or that we haven't already put in 3 solid hours of unpaid labor before we even sit down at our desks in the morning. And still, we've been overlooked come promotion time. I just want to pause here and say to you all, it's not us. It is not us. When you leave work every day feeling like you simply can't take one more instance of mansplaining or gaslighting, it's not us. When you watch what's happening in the United States right now, it's not us. It's patriarchy. And though I hate to get political, it's a total lie. As anyone who knows me will know that. Men have spent thousands of years getting us to this very moment, pitting women against women with the idea that when one of us succeeds, another of us fails. But this is not a zero-sum game. In fact, it's not a game at all. At this point in history, I don't think it's overly dramatic to say that it's about the very future of our civilization. Forget about the corporate sphere. Women still hold less than 10% of the world's top leadership positions. And look at the state we're in right now. We spent yesterday wondering if the leader of the free world was going to bomb Iran into oblivion, and for what? I can't help but wonder where we'd be if the women were finally put in charge. I suspect that a lot of us might enjoy living in that reality, and I'm pretty damn sure that the world would be a safer, more equitable place for everyone. So while I know we might not bring down the patriarchy today, we are going to hear from a whole whack of smart women about what works in terms of advancing women in the workplace, the barriers that are holding us back, and how to kick them down, and more. So without further ado, let's get into it. Thank you so much.
What is happening today? What is happening today? Thank you, thank you, Dawn, for grounding us. Thank you, Poonam. She didn't take my notes. The notes just disappeared, so I apologize, Poonam. We have notes again. And we also have context that we want to talk about next. It's time to hear how this work is playing out in real life. For our first panel, we have someone who I met while I was here at the Globe, Deanne Gage. She's going to be coming on with her panelists to talk about gender parity and give us real talk on what is working while we move from insight to action. Deanne, you can come up to the stage with your panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dio. I'm Deanne. I'm a reporter with Globe Advisor here at the Globe and Mail, and I'm really excited to be moderating this session. We have 3 business leaders here with us today, each with a wealth of experience and expertise. We'll explore how their organizations are advancing gender equity and share what has helped them advance in their own careers and how they've been change makers within their organizations. So I'm pleased to introduce to my left, Cheryl Manuel, Chief Brand and Relationships Officer at Deloitte Canada. And to Cheryl's left, we have Jennifer Lee, Chief Administrative Officer and Chief Legal Officer at Chorus Entertainment, Inc. And Chorus has been consistently on the Women's Lead Here list for every year for the past 7 years. And finally, to Jennifer's left, we have Chani Sia, co-founder and CEO of Got Care. Got Care is recognized as the Globe and Mail's top growing women-led companies this year. All right, let's get started with the broad question. Many organizations talk about advancing gender equity. What, in your experience, separates real progress from good intentions? Jennifer, let's start with you.
Is this, oh, it is already on. Okay, there wasn't a light. So, first of all, thank you everyone for having us and spending time with us. And I'm thrilled that Chorus has been on the list. And I like this list because it's like it's factual, right? Like we didn't, you can't really write about it. It's either true or it's not, and it's been true for 7 years. We talked about what we were going to talk about, and I did say, I was like, okay, maybe, I don't know if everything I'm saying is technically approved by Chorus, but since I'm also the head of comms, I'm going to take liberties. Because obviously, like, we do have ERGs, we have like employee resource groups, we have DI policies, and I do believe in all of those. I think they're good. But for us, I think one of the things when people talk about culture and policies and how you do that, I think it's actually really important to not just have those things and not just have data. I won't name where I was before, who I'm talking about, but somewhere along the way when I was doing something in DI, we were looking at data, and you know, there was the statistic that was X number of women at this level were leaders, and it was a pretty healthy number. And at the next level, which was the, you know, actual executive level, precipitous drop. Everyone was cool with that. They're like, no, that's reflective, because you actually, if you benchmark it against the comparable group, right? If you go VP and up or SVP and up, that's the standard. But I was like, you're losing, it was like from 42, and then the next jump was to 20. So where are the 20-something%? So the way we try to think about it at Chorus is to get the data and get the information, get the policies, get awareness, but not be so fixated on it, and then just be careful what you're doing with the data. Like, you can't just say, like, job done, which I think that's normal, right? You achieve something, we celebrate this, but it's really continuous. You can lose good things very quickly. You can lose good people. You can lose women from the workforce very, very quickly through subtle changes or impacts to the way you are. So that's, I would probably say, one of the things we try to focus on is what are we actually doing? How are people actually feeling? And not just using statistics and data and, you know, policies just to measure them.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheryl, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, all great points. And at Deloitte Canada, we really look at, we want to make sure that we're not being performative. So we have to make sure that DE&I optics don't actually suggest that we're making advancement. So making sure that we have like real empowerment and support. So when we have women moving into the next level, do they have budget? Do they have headcount? Do they have funding? Do they have what they need to be successful, so that it's not just a press release, it's an actual promotion to get them to the next level. And as you said, Jennifer, like really baking that into the system and holding ourselves accountable well beyond the metrics.
Great. And Chenny?
Yeah, so at our organization, we decided to make it a part of our governance structure. So we became a certified B Corp, which then means that a lot of these metrics are within how you're even governed. And that was a really important change for us, because it really set the tone to our entire team around what we really stand for and why. And how that trickles down for us is that within each team leader, they specifically report back in terms of what are the diversity levels on their team, not just in what you can see, but also in the things that you can't see. So for example, we look at disability, both diagnosed and undiagnosed. We look at work style. We look at age, all of these different aspects, and it's up to each leader to then carve out a specific growth path for their, identified top performers.
Terrific. Now let's talk sponsorship. It's quite different from mentorship. How does it work? Why is it so difficult to pursue? Does anyone want to jump in here?
I can start.
Great,
when I think of mentorship like a coffee chat, and sponsorship is actual capital, and most women are over-caffeinated and underfunded. So we keep that sponsorship is really where our focus is, because women don't need more advice, they need more access.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's a great distinction. So, this is a personal anecdote, but it's one that it's what not to do. So I was at one of these events once, and this is a true story. I won't name the people again. This is somebody's actual example of sponsorship. We had the same topic, and very senior male leader said, "Oh, here's I absolutely believe in it." He's like the keynote speaker. "Here's my example of sponsorship." when I graduated from my name brand Ivy League US school, I was an engineer, but I really wanted to go into business. And I tried to get into Wharton to get my MBA, and I was rejected. But then I got the alumni newspaper for my name brand Ivy League school, and I realized one of my classmates was now the dean of admissions at Wharton. So I called him, and then I got in. They're like, and you too should look for that. That is sponsorship. And I was like, okay, that's not applicable. I'm like, I'm from a very small town in Northern Ontario. So that was very divisive. That actually led to a lot of calls to HR. We decided not to ask that person to speak again. But that was, the event was like 1,400 people were listening. This was in COVID, it was remote. And so that was bananas. But I do believe in what we were trying to achieve, and I really believe this. So you absolutely need actual people to help you. So you need programs, you need access, you need attitudes, like all those things, but like you need individuals. And I think that's true for men and for women or whatever you identify as, like for all people. You need that, and it doesn't have to look like you, it doesn't have to be like you, like maybe it's unpopular to say, like some of my greatest sponsors have been people who identify as men. And so I would say this for women, like I encourage you to like look for that, but also be that, because I think this room is filled with very, very seasoned and experienced and probably very well-connected people. So I would say one thing for yourself is to look, how can you do that for someone? So to your point, Cheryl, like coffee is nice, mentor is nice, like you want to give people advice, but if you're hiring, if someone's struggling on your team, but you think they're great, if there's opportunities, if there's actual things you can do for people to put them into roles and to help them succeed and to help them move their careers along in the way that they want, you need that, and you should actually do that. Or you can call the Dean of Wharton Admissions. But, you know. So that's open to you. You should also do that. But I would say that's my example of what not to do.
Jenny, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are in a room full of values-aligned others who would be happy to help you with whatever challenge you're facing. And at a quick story, so I also sit on the board of Corliss, formerly SHEO, which funds women and non-binary entrepreneurs with a global fund. And interestingly, as you know, like only 4% of women receive funding. And you can make all of the introductions that you want, but the challenge is, how do you change how that woman is being perceived in a pitch room? And so what I've learned through my work at Corliss is that it's not just about making that introduction to that investor, but also supporting that woman in knowing what room they're about to walk into, what they're actually facing, and effectively equipping them with the right tools and people to tackle that. So whether that means supporting them with having the right legal advisor to support, having the right financial advisor to make the financial model work as such to resonate. I think it's really around how do we equip our peers and our colleagues so that they can succeed.
Terrific. Now let's talk data. How useful is data in tracking gender equity, and are we using it in the most effective way? Cheryl, let's start with you.
So we have a lot of data. You can imagine that Deloitte has a ton of data. And while we've got data and we have lots of things that we report on, we're really moving away from sort of measuring, who has a seat at the table and, our gender numbers, et cetera, and moving into making sure that we are measuring how we're supporting and empowering. So we're measuring things like, how are we operationalizing flexibility into our system? We're looking at measuring things on how are we actually funding women in different roles and in different endeavors and projects that they're going after. So we're moving away from measuring diversity and equity and now measuring the empowerment and the support to make them successful.
Jenny, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at GawCare, it's like our numbers look good, but then you talk to the individuals and we hear a lot of struggles. I think that to everyone's point earlier, the numbers can be really misleading. And so I'd encourage you to think about other types of evaluation metrics. So for example, what if there was a reverse mentorship or reverse survey that was done? Kind of like shifting that power dynamic from a top-down reporting structure to a bottom-up reporting structure can really reveal things that people may be nervous or uncomfortable, or that invisible data that you as a leader might not have access to.
I think that's a great point. I think, look, you do need it because you don't want people to not actually know and have excuse. Because you can go the other way too. Like, I feel like it's going well, and you hear that even if your companies do engagement surveys. Sometimes I don't. Some of you've been like, "Oh, it looks like you're not doing so." Oh no, but I feel like the team is happy. On the flip side, though, I totally agree, Jen. Like a lot of it is subjective, and so I've told this story before because it's just true, and it's how I explain how I felt. Because often I get, Jen, how is it like, as a, visible minority woman? I'm a lawyer by trade, and how came up with that. So my husband, who is a really wonderful, like, blue-eyed white man, so it's okay. He knows about this story. But we actually worked at the same firm. That's where we met. And I tell the same story. So, I understand that there's subtle things that you pick up when people are speaking when you get to know them, but I'm talking like I'm wearing a suit, he's wearing a suit. So we just compare experiences. Same firm, around the same time, same university, that's not where we met. And this is now about 25 years ago when I started. But I can't even count, like it's literally like innumerable the number of times that, I stopped wearing a suit, a black suit. I think it's also because I had that look of like, I was a bit younger, but to work events, because I would say every other one I'd be mistaken for the waitstaff. Like people have given me their napkins, so many name tags, like you're just giving it to me, that's great, bathroom directions. I've been at closing where like I'm the lawyer and like people have just asked me to shred documents. I've been in student interviews where I'm the interviewer and another partner who doesn't know me has introduced himself to me or asked me to get the coffee. So, and I'm not even saying this like, I'm not upset, I'm really not upset. I'm just saying this is kind of normal. I'm not even getting into other like more leered remarks. So I asked my husband, how many times, like I'm talking like without speaking and without context, but just by looking at you in the same context, same job, same look, has that ever happened to you? And his answer is 0. Like absolutely 0. So that is just my best way of explaining, like there is a subjective experience and it goes for like, it's not just women, like it's, people judge people on how they look. So I would just say it's hard to measure. I wish I had a perfect program for getting how people feel, but I think it's important for every organization, big or small, and I really, getting to know Chenny in the prep to really admire and take some of her ideas, how to think about it. But I encourage you, wherever you are, whatever level you are, like I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but you actually have to take the time to like ask people how they're doing and find ways to get like honest feedback and data. So whether it's a 360, whether it's anonymous, whether it's through a different type of survey, you also have to recognize that people are just inherently not going to tell you things because you're in a position of power, you hold the keys to their career, right? You pay them. But that's what you have to dig at, because on the surface, it's taken me 25 years to be confident enough for you to tell you that anecdote. I would have spent 15 years never repeating that. And I don't know a single survey that could elicit that very consistent feeling that I had. And so that's probably what I would say. It's not the best answer, but that's just, if you can work at it in your own organization, that's what I would encourage you to do.
Thank you for your candor. That's really powerful. Let's talk systems versus individual. Chenny, what is the role of the system versus the individual in ensuring gender parity? I've heard about broken rung, so how do you see that playing out in real life?
Yeah, like I think that so much advice is around, hey, you should do this, you should do that, da, da, da. And in reality, what we should really work on is, at least the perspective we take in our organization is, what if it was less about behavior change of that person who's being discriminated against? And what if we actually just change that system that creates that discrimination in the first place? Because without that, we risk burnout, we risk overwhelm, and I think that's why we see the cliffs drop that we do when it comes to that leadership. At a certain point, you're just like, I'm just fed up. Like, I'm an individual human, I can only do so much. When we, and I think when we think of the systems, we can think of it in terms of the practical everyday interactions that we have within our team. So for example, even thinking about, okay, how does my team organize around meetings? How do we prep for meetings? How do we show up for meetings? What does that post-meeting experience look like? How much of that is informed based from a patriarchal, male-driven power dynamic? And what would it look like to redesign that in a way where it's not about gender parity, but it's really about to enhance the productivity of everyone that is involved, to get the maximum value as an organization from everyone who attends. And I think when we think about it in that way, and we actually give ourselves permission to completely redesign, these common rituals like meetings as an example, it gets into some really powerful stuff there. And especially given that the vast, over 90% of our organizations in Canada are small and medium-sized businesses. It's like, that's a lot of companies that hire a lot of people where that decision-making tree isn't that far up. Like we have the power to make those decisions and to change that today.
Great. I'd like to move on to lived experiences now. I'd like to hear from each of you about what has personally worked for you in terms of moving the needle in terms of gender equity. Cheryl, let's start with you.
Sure, just even building on what Chenny was saying, we need to stop fixing the women, start fixing the systems. And for me personally, it was stepping outside of the system. So there's lots of systems that, our work system was designed for the 1950s, family atmosphere, et cetera. And so for me, most of my career progression and the moments that were sort of really pivoted have been stepping outside of the system, combined with this active sponsorship. So individuals that were willing to put their reputation on the line for me. So we want to keep working at our systems and getting them better, but I would also encourage everyone to step outside of the system and just own your own destiny.
I think for me, it's like you have to actually look at yourself and say, how are you asking for things? Which you guys don't know me at all, but if you do, people are like, oh my God, there's no way you're afraid to say something to someone. I really, really am so uncomfortable for so long with conversations about where I'd like to move into, how much I'd like to get paid, even just people's time. So I think you have to own that yourself. You have to think whether it's maybe your own sort of personality, maybe it's a cultural upbringing thing. For me, it definitely was a little bit. But an example would be like, I would start even someone who was clearly very interested in hiring me, like, okay, like, I'm sorry to bother you, or thank you, like, just start with like, thank you so much for your time. And you have to start being like, okay, your time is also valuable. I mean, you're not being an egomaniac about it, not listening to people, but you're approaching it with like intent. And I say that sometimes to more junior people. It's kind of difficult. Like, people will book you for coffee. What do you want to talk about, right? And I don't mean that because I'm impatient. It's hard to guide someone. A lot of people start with what they don't like. So I would say for me, what's worked is when, it took me a very long time to be much more intentional, thoughtful, and frankly, direct in the right situation, obviously, and with the right people, but to get to what I'm asking for. So is it that I want to be considered for a new role? Do I want to be hired? Do I want to be put on an assignment? Do I want more money? Do I want to switch a team? Do I need resources? It can still be the answer is no, the system can still not work, but for me personally, I've had to learn to make sure that I'm also advocating for myself, and really there's really no one else that's going to do it as well than yourself, right? No one's going to care about you more than you. So for me, that's something it took about 20 years to get to, but I always encourage people to think about it that way.
I don't know if this is a little bit of cynicism kicking in, but for me, it's like, try a different door. Like, at the end of the day, if you're experiencing a no, it's like, you can just try somebody else. I always choose to believe whenever, whether we're facing a customer who's acting poorly, an investor who's acting poorly, I always choose to believe, you know what, I could spend time with this person, or there are 10, 20, 30, 40, 100,000 other people who'd be happy to having this conversation with me instead. So I can mold myself to this person's needs, or I can go and find myself one of those other 10, 20, 100,000 people over there. And just like really protecting my energy around that. And then on the team side, just making sure that, cutting through the stuff that isn't being said. What's worked really well for us organizationally is hiring an external coach, really like true, almost like therapist level of confidentiality. Our team members knowing that, and them having one-on-one sessions with a third-party coach, and then that coach then synthesizes what she or he is hearing and reports back to our leadership team, like super honest thoughts. Having this sort of third party, almost like arm's length, has been enormously helpful for organization.
Great. Let's talk leadership models. Are traditional leadership models incompatible with equity, and what alternative models could be more effective? Jennifer?
Oh, I feel like I'm in a traditional leadership model, so I'm probably part of the problem. So, yeah, I guess for me, it's like, what do you define as traditional, right? So, I don't know if it's the leadership model, it's probably the work model. And I actually am finding this, it's more generational for me, I find, than even gender based. When I was coming up, it was all really kind of based on gender, like women's trying to balance home and whatever. But I see lots of like younger guys who are like, well, I don't know, I would also like to have a life. I would like to take paternity leave. I would like to do things. You have aging parents, things outside. So I think one of the things that openly I find I'm kind of in the middle of is that I'm trying to bridge like the older model, which I feel like rewards like a certain type of work. And even if you want to say that you're open-minded or not, and like you don't do FaceTime, it's more ingrained. And it's not saying this universally, but how long are you there? How hard did this person work? Did they give it their all? And there's almost like this badge to be like, oh my God, like, they gave up their vacation, and like, oh, they worked on a long weekend. Oh, you shouldn't have. But then you're secretly like, that person's a hard worker. They deserve it. And I think also some of the constructs when we're interviewing and when we try to meet people, we really, really try to do this differently at Chorus for this reason. But people gravitate to people they like. And that's normal. That's totally fine. Of course you want that. And that, you call it cultural fit. But I do think that some of the ways we go about that, a lot of the ways we go about that, again, it favors people just to like honestly look for the person they'd like to have a drink with, they'd like to hang out with. So, I don't have a great answer for, what we could move to, but I would say if you're trying to like move the needle within your organization realistically, I guess the two things I would think about is, how are you as a leader thinking about how you reward and see, like what's your definition of good work and a contribution from someone? It doesn't have to just be time-based and traditional ideas. And when you're recruiting and bringing in new people, how are you creating environments and just the ability for them, we always say be your true self, but like, are you creating that environment where they feel comfortable and they can interact with you in a way that's a little bit more holistic and less traditional?
Yeah, I can build on that. We're a 180-year-old firm, so you can imagine that we do have a fairly traditional structure that is similar to, many in this space. But what we're seeing at Deloitte is we're seeing more and more step outside of that. We call it squiggly paths. So many of our highest performing individuals are seeking squiggly paths for the firm. So what they're doing is they're stepping outside of the sort of standard, elevation throughout the firm model, and they're seeking their own. They're mastering their own destiny, seeking their own things that make them feel whole. And what's interesting about it is when we look back, and I know I've had a squiggly path, when we look at individuals that have built squiggly paths in the firm, there's a lot of pauses and pivots. It's not a line, it's not walking up the ladder. And those pauses and pivots are great for both men and women, but definitely great for women because it allows you to actually chart and make sure that you're living your best life while you're moving forward. So for us, it's really empowering to see that we're having more and more of that. We're trying to encourage it even more.
Jenny, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of meta thoughts. Okay, so there's this great book called Reinventing Organizations. If you've never heard of it, Google it, it's great. And it talks about how organizations can be different colors, so like really quickly. Red organization acts like a military, right? Like chain of command, that's not, oh, sorry, no. And then you have your, sorry, that's a That's a orange organization. It's like a military. Then you got your red organization, which kind of acts like the mafia, or bluntly, startups, fighting for survival, like chaos everywhere, right? Then you got, anyway, it just talks about all the different colors and all the different kinds of organizations. And what I really appreciate about that kind of framework is thinking about, what if your organizational state is not just one state, but what if it's fluid? You have a bad quarter revenue-wise. Okay, we kick into a different way of operating, right? We have, crap, we have a retention problem. Great, we hit into a different mode of organizing. I think the challenge is we're so rigid in like our definition, and then it's so resourcefully expensive to change the mode. So what if we just had different modes, and then we can just orient towards that? So because I think there's, it's like I know we like to diss the patriarchy, but it plays a role. Like there's moments in time where that type of leadership is actually really necessary. That type of over definition of structure is actually really helpful. Where it gets challenging is when we do that all the time. So yeah, so typically think of it as okay, what is a good time, organizational structure, and what's a challenging time organizational structure?
Jennifer, you mentioned caregiving, I guess aging parents and things like that. Do you think that that's something that could be a bridge between the genders? Because that's something that's universally.
Yeah, that's true. I think, well, in my age group anyway, the most universal topic is oh my God, what is happening with your name, elderly parent, aunt, and uncle? So, yeah, and I think it's a great point, Anna. I think there's just. Anyway, I'm totally fine with the focus of the discussion today. I think it's great, but I think especially women, I think might tell you this, is that also people just identify, depending on the situation, the time, or the day, differently, right? So sometimes I'm my perspective here is as a woman. Sometimes it's as, first generation Canadian or second generation Canadian. Sometimes it's not any of those things, person with a disability. So, if I think about your question more broadly, it sounds really easy to do, but, it's looking for similarities, not looking for differences, but common ground. And I actually think what we all share is that every person has some things or multiple things that have made their lives challenging, that worry them, that they feel have hindered them. And so I totally it's kind of fun to make fun of my husband sometimes, but he has his things too, right? He lost his hair when he was 19. He's never had hair. So my daughter loves talking about that. But I just mean there's things that make people self-conscious, that worry them. And I think, in a workplace, without obviously pushing people past their comfort zone, it's important to look for things like that. And I think if you look for that, you'll find kind of different areas where you can actually relate. And it's a better way to have a conversation about what you need and what, the change that you want to bring about is looking like. It's not going to be tied specifically to the thing, right? You don't have to be we're both X or Y, but what you're relating to and what you're trying to change is related to how to make things easier, more accessible, create more sponsorship, et cetera, for whatever the person is kind of worried about.
Okay. I'd like to address the issue also with DEI initiatives, because there has been some pullback with companies on that. I'm just curious, have you seen that and what people should do about it? Cheryl, and then maybe Chen.
Yeah, so Deloitte Canada, we're not seeing any pullback, whether it's reported or not pulled back, but we see it, of course, in the world. It's less conversation. And I think it was talked about earlier with some of the other speakers, making sure that we're getting the right focus on it. So moving away from that performative look at it and actually how is it actually moving us forward. For us, access to talent and having the right talent, 51% of people graduating university are women. Our talent is coming from a 50-50 based crowd, so we need to make sure that we've got access for both.
So plus one in that, I think one other interesting trend that we've seen is that we live in a world right now where more caregiving is required generally across the board, right? Whether it's as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend, as a sister, what have you, just the demands that the world has of us are increasing right now because generally people are struggling more right now. Fact. And I think that it's, when we think about when for example, If, let's say, someone's at a hospital, they're an older adult at a hospital, the first person, there's no family contact, guess who the doctor is calling or nurse is notifying? The eldest daughter on the list. Like, it just is, right? So I think but that behavior exists in every other way as well. So, you're struggling, male or female, you're more likely to call a female friend. And so when we have this, and that work is really, really important right now for us to do. So the question becomes, how can we really orient work in a way where in a world where it's demanding more from women? So when, I think we often think about just like flexibility, when like a location flexibility, and we kind of leave it at that, right? But we don't really actually talk about, hour flexibility or day flexibility. Like that flexibility kind of just sticks there. So that's kind of I think the challenge that we're all facing into and stepping into, and we know that generally, across the board, revenue growth is down too. So we're hitting these pressures on both sides, which I think is a great reason for some reimagination. Okay.
All right, we're almost at time, so I wanted to ask all three of you briefly, what is one change that would most accelerate progress for women in leadership? Something actionable that people in the audience can take away. Cheryl, go ahead.
One actionable change, I would say, from an individual is step outside the system. Don't just believe that you have no rules, and just move forward, and you'll probably get a lot further. And from an organization perspective, is to really enable that and bake that in as an expectation and celebrate it.
Yeah, so anyone who's thinking of the thing they want, I would say go ask for it. And to Chenny's point, you don't have to take no for an answer. Maybe it's, oh God, this is Meghan Markle, not yet. Okay, I'm not going to quote her, but maybe it's not right now. But yeah, if the thing that you've been secretly hoping for, the conversation you were scared to have, like go have it. Prepare for it, but go do it. That's one actionable thing that you can do, or do it for someone else. If you owe it to someone's been bothering you, not bothering you, but asking you, you've put off something, like go do it for that person. You can also help be that change, so.
We're in a time of increasing social isolation, and so my encouragement would be to not do that for yourself and for your team. Is to how can you generate more community, how can you generate more connection, and how can you generate more intimacy in those connections as well.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. We're going to have to leave it here. Please join me in thanking Cheryl, Jennifer, and Chenny for sharing their valuable insights.
Thanks. Thank you.
I know all of you were wondering if I was going to trip again. I know if I was sitting there, I'd be thinking, is she going to trip again? I did not trip again. However, while I was back there, I was watching people's reactions to what we just heard on the panel, and I saw a lot of nodding. And maybe people wanted to snap, maybe, but didn't. And I'm hoping that when we have the networking break and the lunch, that you'll all have an opportunity to talk about some of what you heard today. Because I know I heard a couple things. I heard about third-party coaches, pauses and pivots, stop fixing the women and start fixing the systems, were just some of the quotes that I picked up. And I'm hoping that when we have time out there, that you'll be able to talk amongst yourselves about that too, because there's so much to talk about. Would you agree? They had great things to say, and we have, yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you. So we have another presentation before we have lunch, and that is from Dr. Wendy Sukier. So as she's coming up to the podium, I'll tell you a little bit about her. She is the academic director of the Diversity Institute. She is going to help us zoom out and look at the bigger picture, drawing on national research and data. We've heard a lot about the importance of data today, and she's going to give us more perspective. And then when she comes back, I'll have one more thing to say before we go to lunch. So over to you, Wendy.
Thanks so much, and it's really a pleasure to be here. It's also, boy, those are hard acts to follow. I just kept looking at my slides and going, done, 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 done. So I will try to keep my remarks relatively short because I'm standing between you and lunch. But I really want to underscore some of the things that were already said. And just a couple of things about the Diversity Institute. We're old, like me. We have a lot of people. We work on a lot of different projects. And we're in the business school. So our whole orientation towards the issues related to gender, truth and reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion are very much grounded in the very clear evidence that it is tied to organizational performance. And you've already heard some of that earlier today. And we think about not just access to talent, and of course women are 51% of the population, the majority of university graduates. We make most of the purchasing decisions. There are clearly multiplier effects when you invest in women. We own 20% of businesses now, and we're partners in another 17%. So, to me, it's marketing 101. If you ignore the interests of women and the perspectives of women, whether you're a corporation or a politician, you're stupid. We're also seeing some gains in non-traditional areas. I've worked on issues related to women in technology since the Montreal Massacre, along with a lot of other things, and we have seen progress, although there are fewer women in computer science today than there were in 1989, which may surprise you. And the progress in terms of women in engineering has been slow, but we're moving forward. We've also cracked 30% in terms of the Toronto Stock Exchange board positions, and that is considered critical mass, and that happened this year. So that's important progress as well. But we know that discrimination is a reality, and it's a reality for women. About a quarter of women in the workplace say that they experience discrimination, but it's compounded if they're racialized women, if they're older women, if they're women with disabilities, if they're Indigenous women, if they're immigrant women. And so we have to remember that discrimination is not just something that impacts mental health, it impacts physical health, it impacts performance, it impacts retention. The experiences of sexual harassment in man-dominated sectors haven't changed a lot since I entered the workforce. We still see more and more. So we have to really think about the issues of discrimination and healthy workplaces as being very much tied to organizational performance. Product and service innovation, this is, I kind of live and breathe some of this because we know that when products are designed without women in mind, often they fail. Early voice recognition systems did not recognize women's voices. And in some cases, they kill us. So I don't know if any of you have read the book Invisible Women, but a lot of the car safety systems were designed using crash test dummies based on male anatomy. And as a result, women were much more likely to be seriously injured or die in car crashes. And there are many, many examples of where there are missed market opportunities. I know SheerTex is not a happy story, but what's interesting about that company is the product was pitched and pitched and pitched and pitched, and you heard earlier about how women don't get investment. It was pantyhose that does not run. Pantyhose that does not run. And the men investors just didn't get it. So there are lots of ways in which investing in women is clearly good for the bottom line. And it's also risk management. I know that we hear a lot about backlash and their spillover effects from what's going on south of the border and in other parts of the world. And I know that multinationals, companies in Canada trying to do business in the States are walking a weird line in trying to fulfill their obligations here as well as their obligations in the United States. But it's very clear that if you back off on equity, diversity, and inclusion, if you back off on your commitments to gender equality and human rights, if you don't meet your obligations under employment equity legislation, those of you who are federally regulated, you are putting your organization at legal risk, financial risk, and reputational risk, and that has not changed. The other thing that I think is important is that Canada is, what shall we say, we're not in the middle of the pack, we're in kind of the top third of companies globally when we look at different measures of the gender gap. We're first in educational attainment. We do okay in terms of economic participation. We don't do so well in terms of health, which may come as a surprise. And when it comes to women in politics, it's a mixed bag. We also know that there continues to be what I would call occupational segregation. So women are more likely to be in some disciplines, women are less likely to be in others. And unfortunately, because of the prioritization of math, computer science, STEM, you know, they talk about we have to teach coding, or they were talking about teaching coding, you know, in vitro, so that your baby hatched and could program. And now we know, did you see the co-founder of Anthropic, which seems to be kind of leapfrogging OpenAI, saying, no, we don't need STEM, we need humanities and social science grads? You saw that? Because prompt engineering is kind of the English major's revenge. So it's really interesting that despite that reality and despite the fact that we know that one of Canada's biggest problem is not the creation of technology, although it's great we won a Nobel Prize, yay, our biggest problem is the adoption, the responsible adoption of artificial intelligence. And guess what? You don't need people who are romantically involved with the technology in order to drive adoption. You need people who understand organizational priorities, ethics, regulation, consumer behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? That's not the STEM folk. So there's some real distortions in my mind that occur because some of our systemic assumptions about what skills are, what knowledge is, what expertise is, and that plays out in a variety of ways. And, you know, we see women are overrepresented in health and care occupations, underrepresented in infrastructure and tech. As I mentioned before, we know that employment rates for women tend to be lower than for men, but if you look at intersectional perspectives, they're lower still for racialized women, for Indigenous women, for recent immigrant women, and women with disabilities. And that also plays out in terms of the wage gaps. So women still haven't quite breached that, although we're getting closer. But racialized women, Indigenous women earn less than others. We also know that there are still barriers to reaching the top, and while there are debates about whether that's what women really want, I don't know if any of you saw the latest list of the top 100 paid CEOs for the first year. There are more women than men named Mark. We hit 5 out of 100 instead of 4. Now, some would say that's great, it's a 20% increase, but 5 out of 100. So this remains an issue. Representation on boards, as I said, we have made progress, there's no question, and we're ahead of countries like Sweden and Denmark, which might surprise you. We also know that in some sectors, they're much closer to parity than others, often federally regulated areas that have been subject to employment equity. And I might have a different view on the importance of data, because I do think what gets measured gets done, and tracking and setting targets is important. As I mentioned, Canada is a country of small business. This is one of those structural things people forget. In the US, 50% of corporations are large. Canada, it's only 10%. And yet, if you look at who's around the table, it's often those captains of industry, the CEOs of big companies, as opposed to small, medium enterprises. And women are increasingly, as was mentioned earlier, gaining traction in terms of business ownership and shared ownership. If you think about farming and agriculture, huge percentage of those are family businesses, and women own 50%. So we really need to be thinking about women entrepreneurship, not as a kind of nice thing to do where we have a little enclave and we pour some money into the women. We need to think about giving women access to all of the opportunities. And so those of you who are in companies, how many of you know if your company that your company has procurement policies that prioritize investing in women and diverse suppliers? A few of you? That is one of the most, it's great to talk about financing women entrepreneurs, but I would rather have a customer than a loan, right? And so procurement, in our view, is one of the most powerful tools we can use to move things forward. Again, if you take an intersectional perspective on SME ownership, we see that racialized people, immigrant women, and so on are overrepresented among entrepreneurs. We've heard about the backlash. The backlash is real. There is no question there are spillover effects. And we have to recognize that part of this is the result of very well-planned and deliberate opposition. Taking over the Supreme Court in the United States was kind of the first step, and it has had ripple effects. We also see the spillover of media in Canada, and a lot of Canadians don't remember that we are not the 51st state, and a lot of what is talked about in the States does not apply here. We also have to recognize, I think, that a lot of us working on gender equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we're very comfortable talking to each other, but not to people who didn't think like us. And trying to find ways to bridge those gaps is increasingly important. I will say very little about the debate about merit versus equity, other than if you don't have equity, you do not have merit, because you are fishing in a very small pond. One of the things that does cause me concern, and people should be attentive to it, and I don't want to pick on anybody in particular, but I remember Andre Picard, a reporter with the Globe, a few years ago said, "No more manels. Don't invite me to a panel if it's all men. There have to be women there as well." And it isn't tokenism. It isn't tokenism, it's looking harder for the expertise. And even, as I said, when we look at things like artificial intelligence, if you think artificial intelligence is only about science, technology, engineering, and math, you're only going to find men. But if you understand what the issue really is, not only are you going to get better results, but you will have more women at the table. And we have seen in Canada lots of people standing firm when head of Shopify wanted to join the tech bros. 200 tech leaders signed a letter saying they stood for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is the thing that, if I leave you with anything, I want to leave you with this. And that is, there are more of us, meaning people who support gender equality, people who support equity, diversity, and inclusion, than there are of them. This is a very large survey, Environics. People who support EDI outnumber those who think it's a bad thing, 3-1. You don't get that impression from the media, because the media likes to, to my hosts, but often they like controversy and conflict. And there's one side and there's the other side. What we have to remember is there are more of us than them, and that Canada's institutions, our charter, our employment equity legislation, our judicial decisions, all reinforce the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So when we think about moving forward, we have to recognize the importance of policies. There's no question that our national childcare policy is probably one of the most important developments for women. There's still implementation issues, but that's something. I remember Charlie Coffey, Vice President of RBC, almost 30 years ago, talking about childcare as an economic issue, not a women's issue. We have to challenge stereotypes, and we have to recognize that everything is political. From the point of view of organizational strategies, in my view, leadership is absolutely key at this particular moment. And it's not just women standing up for women, it's men standing up for women, it's women standing up for transgender people, for immigrants, for racialized people, and so on. We have to stick together. We also think that this notion of diversity across the value chain is absolutely key, and thinking about what it means to bring a gender lens to your products and your services. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to what each and every one of us do day in, day out in order to build more inclusive environments. So from our perspective, it's not wokeness or political correctness. Marketing 101, we need to mainstream gender across government policies and programs, whether we're talking Build Canada, Buy Canada, the AI strategy. Women need to be at the table and they need their share of those investments. We need to really focus on culture, and it's culture at the national level, not just at the organizational level. And what it's, in my mind, is one of the really important pieces of advice is this idea of thinking like a bear. Thinking like the people who don't necessarily get it, don't necessarily agree with us, thinking about how to frame this in economic terms, in development terms, in terms that will benefit all Canadians, because if we don't invest in women, we will be left behind. Thank you very much.
That last part. She said, if we don't invest in women, we will be left behind. And she also said, we need to be thinking about women entrepreneurship. So I'm hoping that for those of us who are in the room, while you're having your lunch, you'll notice some vendors that are out there vending. They are all small businesses and small businesses owned by women. So my hope is that you will take advantage of what's out there, support them, and think about them. So I am between you and lunch. How many of you are hungry or smelling what's happening? Those of us who are in the room. For those who are in the virtual audience, we'll see you back here in 45 minutes. For those of us who are here, this is your time to eat, network, and I'm going to also, remember I said in the beginning, I'm interested in what you all are thinking. So when I come back, I might tap a few of you to hear what of the insights you heard this morning stayed with you, because I'm interested, and then we'll get into the second half of the program. So thanks, have a great lunch, and I'll see you at the other side. Welcome back, everybody. How is everyone? How was that lunch? How did we enjoy the lunch? That was, who had the fish in particular, I really enjoyed, among other things. Now we don't have a roving microphone, so I'll just repeat what I hear. Or we do have a roving microphone at the back and one there. I'm interested to know, like I said at the break, what people took from this morning. Did anyone have a particular insight or takeaway or thought that they were like, oh, you know what? I didn't think this before I came, but now I'm thinking this. Can I volunteer someone to say something? Does anyone have any thoughts? No one in here has thoughts. Oh, someone right on the side here. Thank you so much for getting us started.
I won't yell.
Oh,
I won't yell. I'll use the mic instead. One thing that stood out to me was operationalizing flexibility. And some of our team had talked about how do you take that from being so macro level and really bringing it down so that you're able to have your leaders, your managers, your assistant managers put that in place. And what does that look like across an organization? Because it can feel overwhelming when you think about how do I systemically change everything.
I think I didn't hear the very beginning. I think you said operationalizing the flexibility.
Yes.
How do you think you can take this back at Choice Properties?
Some of the things we talked about is whether you're looking at accommodations that might be needed for somebody on your team. If you're looking at your DEI metrics, how do you take it from being a grand scale down to each individual department? How do you invite feedback and open up the doors so that there's really open conversations and feedback two ways, not just from leaders down, but from across levels, from lateral across.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any other thoughts or takeaways from the presentation? Thank you so much for sharing and getting us started. Anybody else on this side have anything? There's someone here at the front and then on the back.
I just really enjoyed the discussion about mentorship versus sponsorship and what that means and what it can look like. And key takeaway is ask for what you want.
What does that mean to you, though? What does mentorship or sponsorship mean to you? And what did it mean for you in your career?
I think that, I'm lucky to come from a very supportive organization. And I think it's just this idea of not being afraid to ask for what you want. And sometimes when that's resources, sometimes it is a harder conversation. And there's been times in my career where I haven't been maybe brave enough to ask for access or resource, but I think that that's a really important conversation and that something I'll bring into my career moving forward.
For those of us who might be younger than you, do you think bravery comes with age?
Certainly, yes.
Certainly, yes. Yeah. Okay, and then there was this, thank you for that. There was this young woman in the back.
Hi, my name is Prerna and I come from Deloitte, Canada. I have to tell you something. There were major reflections, but some of them that stayed with me. One, that the lady on the panel said, Jennifer Lee, that whenever I would get into a conversation and I would thank that person multiple times, hey, thank you for taking the time, and I'm the same. Because I don't own the room and I don't own my space. So I've learned that it's okay to own your space. Be as a first generation immigrant, it's very important to know your voice, and women are done with taking advice. I think it's time for action. So that also stayed with me, and major reflections, I'll share more, but these are the ones which come to mind. Yeah.
So one is to own your voice.
Take
That's
the space.
Something that you say you didn't do before.
I did, but not in that capacity without thanking 100 times. I did thank 100 times for getting opportunities or even giving opportunities to people to be on the table. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Any other reflections? I can take one more if there's anyone else who has anything they want to share.
Hi there. I have one thing I really need to ask, and it's Erin, who was on first. Who I think she's the VP of the Globe and Mail. She has a menopause policy. Would you share your menopause policy? I would love to know what's in the menopause policy.
So there's been an ask at least of one organization, it sounds like many organizations, that are open to learning more about the menopause policy. Maybe that's something that could be talked about next year at the next Women Lead Here as its own section. That's amazing. And there was one other comment that came while we were out, and they said they really enjoyed the diversity of the panels, which is really nice to hear. I just want to tip a hat to Jennifer Bedame, Lisa, and Andrea from the Globe and Mail team. They deserve a round of applause. They're the ones who pulled this all together. Thank you for sharing your reflections. Remember I said I was going to call on you. I was not joking. I was serious. And our next panel that we're going to have is about health. We're talking about menopause and health, and then also for those who are on the earlier side of their womanhood, health is really important, and it really impacts how we show up at work. So we're going to have a discussion that's moderated by Christy Kirkup. She's the health reporter for the Globe and Mail. So as Christy comes up, if you can please give her applause as her panelists join her. Thank you, Christy. Christy, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And just to the speaker in the room who was talking about owning their voice, I guess this is my version of that, although I'll tell you, I've never really struggled with that problem and had a lot of people tell me I talked a lot as a kid, so here I am. As mentioned, I'm Christy Kirkup. I'm part of the Globe and Mail's health team, and women's health is one of the specific beats that I report on in a big way here at the Globe. And today we are going to be talking about women's health at work. This is not just a personal issue, of course, but it is one that involves leadership, cultures, and systems, and women at all levels face professional demands, and those pressures can intersect with women's health challenges, caregiving responsibilities. I know that one well. I have 2 daughters that keep me hopping in addition to a busy career. And as well, there are those major life transitions that were just mentioned that directly affect careers. And so this conversation is about physical and mental well-being, of course, but it's also about how organizations can create cultures where women don't have to choose between their health and their leadership potential. I also want to acknowledge that women's health is also an intersectional experience. So this not only involves gender, but other factors such as race, socioeconomic status, disability status, age, diverse gender identity, as well as, again, those caregiving responsibilities. And so needless to say, we have a lot to discuss. So thank you so much for being here to take part in the conversation. And I'll be welcoming up the 3 fantastic speakers that are going to be joining us today to participate in this discussion. So please join me in welcoming Emily Gagnon, the Vice President of Transformation and Products at Desjardins Insurance. As well, I'd like to welcome Sandra Heller, the General Manager of Astellas Pharma Canada. And last but not least, we have Dr. Titileo Olipona, a primary care physician and executive lead physician at Cleveland Clinic Canada. We had a rogue microphone, sorry about that. All right, thank you so much for joining the discussion today. So pleased to be here with you. I'll start off by asking why, and I'll get you all to go around, beginning with you, Emily, but why should physical health, mental health, and wellness for women and gender diverse people be a priority in the workplace?
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me. So, of course, it's a priority, and Desjardins Insurance partner with McKinsey and WHCC to have a research, and the insight was really eye-opening. So, for women, Canadian women spend 24% more of their lives in poor health. So that's significant. And it's across all ages. So from fertility ages, caregiving, menopause symptoms, and it's often, linked with social cultural pressure, expectations, and if it's not recognized, then it can also be an issue with, talent retention because women are exiting workforce. So it's key and it's for sure a priority.
How about you, Sarah?
Sandra.
No
problem. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I think it's been an incredible talk this morning. I think one of the things for us that's really important when I think about our organization, we're actually 64% women. So when we take a look at some of the initiatives that are needed for physical health, for mental health, it's really also about a business need. When you think about, as simple as it is, women's health equals business success, period. But we take a look at what can we do in order to ensure that we are, as you say, increasing productivity, making sure that we aren't having women exiting the workforce, and making sure that at the end of the day we have more and more women that are going up into the senior management levels so that we do have diversity of thought. So I think that it's important that we focus not just on the physical health, but the mental health as well. And organizationally, I think it's really important that it's not just done from a professional perspective, but also our personal lives. It's important to be mindful of that as well.
At your organization, Sandra, how have you gone about trying to incorporate this?
I mean, to be honest, it was interesting when the question came up earlier. So policies are areas where organizations can start to make some real inroads. We obviously have, as I mentioned, a large group of people that are female employees, and based on the statistics this morning, I did some quick math. Our leadership team is 83% women.
Really?
83. And so it's really key that we take a look at some of the policies that can be put in place. We have done some really unique situations where we have, for example, we have menopause ambassadors. So it's something that we end up providing and making sure that women have another opportunity to talk to people who are their peers, who it's probably easier to have conversations with other women as opposed to necessarily having them with their supervisors. So there's a lot of things that you can put in place to make sure education is key, awareness is key, but I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. So
thank you. And how about you, Doctor?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me? So we all know that if you're physically strong and you're doing very well, you will thrive at work. I think the stats are showing that if you're healthy, take good care of yourself, there's a 20 to 30% increase in productivity in companies, right? You have more revenue, you have more sales with that. You also have retention in your workforce, right? You have decreased absenteeism when you're mentally and physically strong. And also decrease in burnout. I know a lot of men and women in this room who work hard, who are amazing CEOs and managers. You know, taking care of your health is very important because you can also be there for people who are looking up to you, who you're mentor to as well. And also too, you also get better productivity. You also get good acquisition of talent as well. And I think down the road, it does well for your company.
I love the business case that you're all making. It does help at the organizational level, I think, when people point out how money talks. I'm wondering if maybe we can touch on some of the inflection points, if you will, in a person's career that might be most difficult. Maybe I'll just start out by saying, I remember when I had my first child, she's now 8, but here I was thinking that I wanted to be the exact same reporter that I was before I had a child, and I wanted to get right back in there. And then I soon realized that my life was very different, and I was juggling different things. And so that, I think, would be, I guess, not so recent now, but a bit of an inflection point in my own career. So what are some of those maybe points, during a person's journey that kind of see these issues maybe come to a head?
Sure, I can start. Well, I think it's very important to have those challenges in mind because it often occur when you have a biological transition combined with pressure at work. Okay, and it's across all ages as well. I'm going to give you a few statistics. So 1 adult in 6 adults will face some fertility challenges throughout their lives. So it's huge. And also 15 to 20% of women will have postpartum depression. So it's high numbers. And also my aha moment, I would say, is 3 women out of 4 will have menopause symptoms that will interfere with their daily lives. So it's really high, high numbers. And often it's silent at work. So people they feel alone and they don't feel supported, but because we don't have a lot of conversation around those numbers. And maybe I can share more a personal note. I was already in a leadership role when I decided to build a family. And it was a hard decision because I had to navigate between, having a child and stepping out of work. And it was a lot of guilt. So guilty not to be in the office with my team, guilty to not fully enjoy my moment with my newborn. So it's really a struggle. And I would say I'm lucky because I had a network around me, but it's not the case for everyone. And also when we go back to work, another struggle, a new routine. So we really need to adapt, and it's challenging, for sure.
What are your thoughts, Sandra?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I remember actually about 25 years ago coming into the industry in pharmaceuticals, and we had to fight to put not just maternity benefits in place, parental benefits in place. And so it's exciting to see where we are from that lens, But now I'm on the other side of the inflection point, and we're looking at more and more women who are continuing their careers in their 50s. As you've said, more and more women who are experiencing debilitating symptoms. 1 in 4 have really significant hot flashes that end up affecting them, that can limit what happens from a work perspective. And I think this is a very key inflection point that we have right now as businesses, that we need to make sure women are feeling supported, women are feeling as though there's options and opportunities for them, and that they don't have to exit the workforce.
And it is common, right, that women may end up leaving the workforce as a result
It is, unfortunately. I think the statistics are like 1 in 10 where women are feeling very much at that level, where you are talking about a lot of women who are at the top of their game in terms of their career paths. Women that we want to make sure are there to bring forward the future of our businesses. And they're having to really determine whether or not they have to step away. About something that can be addressed through both education, through awareness, and through some small changes that can be made at an office environment. So I think there's opportunity.
So I think with my panelists here talking about the inflection points, I like to look at it in 3 different parts as well. You look at it from a reproductive part where for new employees, you're trying to have a family. You might go through fertility, like Emily said, 1 in 4 would have infertility issues. And because of that, you're going to have 2 separate appointments. You're going to have your appointments for work. You're going to have your appointments for your medical appointments. And that's going to impact you. How are you going to function while at work? You're not going to be at your maximum capacity. That's one inflection point. The second inflection point is perimenopause. With where I work at Cleveland Clinic, I'm seeing a lot of my patients coming in who are struggling with the hot flashes, the night sweats, the sleep disturbances, which impacts how they function. And it's also going to impact productivity for companies, impacts absenteeism as well. And then the third inflection point that I'm seeing from my patients who are in the sandwich generation, who have aging parents, who have children, who are navigating the stresses and the pressures of work and being managers and CEOs, you have that part as well as trying to take care of your health. So you have all of this, and navigating it through these inflection points can be difficult for a lot of women.
I'll just, they're a great colleague of mine in the newsroom. Catherine Blaisbaum has just penned a book about infertility, her own journey. So it actually was just released. And so, yeah, learning that colleagues, again, obviously navigating some really tender experiences on the road to build a family. One of the themes that comes up a lot is how unprepared women end up being, and workplaces for that matter, for these health transitions that we've been touching on. Again, take perimenopause and menopause, for instance. And I'm wondering, Doctor, if you can take us through some of the symptoms and experiences of people who are going through this transition.
Okay. I know it's a very personal thing, if I can ask. How many of you are actually, if you feel okay to share, how many of you are going through perimenopause right now? Raise your hand. I know I am. And so what's going on in perimenopause is that your estrogen levels are decreasing. Your body, you're preparing yourself for menopause, where your estrogen levels are very low. So your estrogen levels are all over the place. It doesn't know what it wants to do. So then you're all over the place. And with that perimenopausal symptoms, it can start early 40s, sometimes late 30s, can stop around 52, 53. And I want to share an important stat here. For Black women, we have the symptoms 2 or 3 years a little bit earlier than other racial groups. And when we also have symptoms, it's more intense than other groups. Reasons we don't know why. But some of the important symptoms that we all know, first thing will be affected your cycles. You used to have long or short cycles. They used to be regular. Now they're sporadic, right? We know about the hot flashes and the night sweats, where now you're seeing a lot of commercials about that nowadays. And thanks to Oprah and like Halle Berry and all the celebrities talking about this, it's a great thing for us. But there are also more symptoms for perimenopause. The brain fog, right? See, that brain fog, it's a real thing where you can process things within 45 minutes, and now it's taking you 2-3 hours to get something done. all of a sudden you're waking up without any reason at 2 or 3 in the morning, like, what is wrong with me? That sleep disturbance, right? The vaginal dryness, the decreased libido, and the most common complaint I'm seeing from my patients right now is, doc, I'm gaining weight in my abdomen and I don't know what to do with it. Those are the major symptoms that we're seeing. And mood changes, mood swings, and a whole bunch of a plethora of symptoms. So those are the major symptoms for perimenopause.
I remember asking a friend, how do you know if you're, having a hot flash? And they said, oh, you'll know. You'll feel like you're going to die.
You know.
So, and I think we have a few, based on the response and the hands up, people know what I'm talking about. I'm wondering, maybe I'll go to you again, doctor. What do you think people understand the least about this part of life? And perhaps how does that lack of understanding affect professional environments?
Yeah, so a few things. Number one, when we go through perimenopause, every individual here, it won't be identical. Your symptoms are going to be different from your friends, from colleagues. The only thing you might mirror what your mom was going through. And it's not until recently, in the last couple of years, that we're finding out more information about perimenopause, right? We're knowing more about what happens, what are some of the physical changes that you go through. But I think at times it may get you in a shocking rate where, oh, I didn't see this coming. And that might impact your productivity. It can impact your mood and how you see yourself, the psychological acceptance of your body's changing. It can impact how you see your colleagues and how you interact with them. And that also can lead to burnout and mental stresses, and you not feeling motivated, you not feeling like yourself. I would say that 10 years ago, we may not have been prepared, but I think it's getting better now. With more information being out there, more resources online, more books are being written about perimenopause and menopause. So I think there's a shift there.
And Sandra, I'm just wondering, especially given the fact that, again, you were talking about the ambassadors within your organization, the impact of the lack of understanding and why this is something that does affect workplaces and an effort to combat that, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So we talk about 5-10 years ago where we would have been. And I don't know about you guys in the audience, but if you've had a conversation with your own mother about what it was like and what their experience was like, you still get a lot of people that were like, I just dealt with it. I just worked through it, soldier up sort of mentality. And we have to reflect on our lives aren't the same as what theirs were, and our demands aren't the same as what theirs were. And quite honestly, this is where the awareness and education piece, it's great that there's a lot more conversation that's happening in the plethora about menopause and about perimenopause, but we need to take action, right? Like we need to make sure that the senior leaders at organizations are putting words behind and action behind the words that they're saying. We need women to feel that it's an awareness that they understand that it is a biological change that is happening. It is natural. It is normal. Shockingly, every single one of us will end up going through it if we get to that age. So the reality is we need to ensure that we are removing the stigma that is surrounding all of this from a workplace environment. And I've told my panelists here, I have 3 daughters, and I hope they don't have to have this conversation in 20 years. I hope that we have paved the way for them, that there's enough awareness within the workplace environment that it's not being treated anymore in the stigma and in the type of situations that are currently happening for employees.
And I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, but I would say from a Desjardins Insurance perspective, what we can do is really looking at the journey from an end-to-end process. So if I go back to fertility issue, let's say, the fertility, pregnancy, postpartum recovery, and motherhood is one journey all linked together on an emotional perspective. And from a Desjardins Insurance, we can of course, through good benefits, make health and wellness more available for women, so that it's easier for them to know, okay, where can I go get some tools, some resources, and also they know what coverage they have and what's being paid for, so at least we can remove this burden from their shoulder. So from a career perspective, I think that's where we can jump in and help.
I'm just going to pivot for a moment. Another common thread that often comes up is how reproductive health and caregiving responsibilities intersect with career progression. And this often happens quietly. Sandra, maybe you can give me tips on how to survive having 3 children and a very successful career.
I mean, so my personal decisions and my personal reflection on this is, to be honest with you, I did feel going through my career that I could do it all, but I didn't necessarily feel I could do it all at the same time. And that was the reality that I chose and the decisions that we ended up making as a family, to be honest with you. But I feel that there is, we've heard a lot of wonderful women talking this morning about the importance of, speaking out and those kinds of things. There's also a little bit of an introspection about what you want, what you need. And sometimes your career path, the zigzags or other opportunities, sometimes your career path doesn't always have to be linear up to the top. And there are moments in my career that I ended up taking sideways approaches so that I would have a bit more time with my family, or I wasn't traveling as much because of the ages that my kids were at. So I made very personal choices to try to help guide my career path that would work for my own family's needs. And I think it's an individual thing, to be honest with you. But
yeah, no, I just think it's always helpful too when we're having these discussions, that personal aspect. So thank you for being open to sharing it. So I'm just wondering how all of you think that fertility journeys, pregnancy, parental leave, family caregiving responsibilities. My goodness, I'm so tired just thinking about all the stuff we've done. I can't wait for that perimenopause to come up. I'm wondering what kind of workplace responses help to reduce rather than reinforce penalties for people as they navigate these challenges. I'll start on this end.
Yes, well, like I said, things that can help also for women to navigate that is having, for Desjardins, we launched a family-focused offer where we, again, see the process from end to end. So it's not only a financial perspective, but having, again, resources, access to that. And we partner also because as an insurer, we're not expert in every single matters. So we partner with organizations that are experts so they feel supported throughout their journey and not on one specific item. So it's really the whole path end-to-end process, I think, is helping.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was just thinking, for me, I think it's a bit of the flexibility piece that we've tried to put in place. We don't have a clock in, clock out, and I appreciate it's not the same case for everyone. But for example, if you are a woman who happens to be experiencing a lot of sleep issues as a result of your menopause, you don't have to necessarily be in first thing in the morning. You can take that time to be able to rest. If you are a mother who needs to pick up their young child or drop them off, we work around that. So we've allowed for some flexibility to ensure that we're not limiting our employees from that perspective. I'd also argue that it's very important, when possible, to have benefit packages for your employees to look at different ways of supporting them, whether it's through fertility all the way through. So it's about listening to your employees' needs, right? And as businesses, it's about us as women also advocating for the rest of our staff and making sure that we are trying to put in place policies to help everyone.
If I'm going to add to Sandra's amazing list there, I think for companies with health spending accounts, maybe expand it a little bit more, having more coverage for massage, psychotherapy sessions, because it's going to be a very tough phase for some individuals. Chiropractic appointments, physio, for patients, postpartum breast pumping coverage for machines or doulas, right? Fertility drugs or sessions, having coverage for that. But also within organization, having lunch and learns, having sessions where you have somebody like myself or corporate medical doctors come in and give you advice on how to take care of yourself, to put your wellness a priority. and being flexible with hybrid, right? I know that, companies have their own HR policies, but being flexible, like Sandra said, with your employees. And very important thing, having the men in your companies educated and sensitive to what you're going through. I think that's going to be key as well.
Maybe I can just add something also to that list, is having more of a tailored approach, because when I left for the mat leave, I had the chance that my organization would keep contact and give me some news, and that's what I wanted. But having that kind of conversation with our employees, saying, okay, what are your preferences? Do you want to have that connection or not? So that we can really adapt with what the preferences of the employee wants is for sure helpful.
And if I can jump in, actually, another flexibility piece that I think, it's very easy to do is even as simple as workstations and where people are, right? So someone who may be experiencing hot flashes may actually want to be closer to the vents and, to an ability to be away from sunlight. I think those are really small changes that you can make that have big impacts on employees. So I think it's not always about trying to recreate something and making sure, it's just looking sometimes at tweaking little things.
I wonder, we touched on the notion of money talking and how this is good for business. I'm wondering if maybe you can touch on the payoff for employers to support employees during these tender life transitions.
Yes, and the survey are clear. The return on investing in women's health give a really high return on investment. And my colleague said it, but 1 woman out of 10 would leave workforce because of menopause symptoms that are not treated. And that happen in senior roles as well. So investing in that, it's good for retention, for performance, for the organization. So for me, it's clear.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with all the points. I think also it's making sure that we are being mindful of the small investments that we end up making have big returns on investment, right? And thinking about our next generation. I mean, I think that there's also a lot to be said for the path that we are providing for them coming through. So I think that it's key that we end up continuing. It is very costly for a business to lose an employee. Very costly for a business to lose an effective and high-performing employee. So anything that we can do to try to make sure that we are retaining our talent is going to be very important for the organizations.
Similar to the panelists as well, from a business perspective, I have my physician hat on. I think the key thing is, you take care of your employees, but prioritizing health, I think that's very important. Prioritizing, yes, we're making money, we're investing in you, the revenue sales are great, but also please take care of your health, get your physical done so you can continue to be productive and we continue to the success that we have. That's my contribution there.
I think that's really important and something that for a lot of people ends up being kind of continue to learn as their life progresses about the importance of taking care of themselves in addition to others in their careers. I'm wondering, this is maybe a bit more of a serious question, but perhaps touching on some of the challenges in terms of consequences for people who may not feel supported. We obviously touched on the fact that people might up and quit. What are some of the other consequences? I know, Sandra, you've talked about the role of mental health and how that's really important. Could there be mental health consequences?
Absolutely. And I'm sure from a physician's perspective, it's definitely something to be worried about. I think that there's also, from the perspective that you have a disengaged employee, you have problems there that are going to end up becoming not just an N of 1, so you will end up starting to have more disengagement, more employee retention issues. So it's really important that you do end up ensuring that your employees are feeling supported.
And go ahead. I also, again, my physician hat on, if employees are not taken care of, leads to burnout. Like Sandra said, mental health disorders, depression, anxiety, but can also increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. If you're stressed out, if you're not sleeping, then I get a call, Dr. Lepone, I need to see you because my blood pressure is high, or increase in metabolic syndrome, right? So those are the things that I worry for patients who don't take care of themselves or where companies are not putting their employees' health a priority. sorry, if I just might add, going back to the whole perimenopausal piece as well, I think it also leads to other health conditions. If that's not a priority, if that's not taken care of, there are long-term consequences down the road. So you want to be mindful of that as well.
And just maybe a quick word on mental health. For women, it's showed that the rate of mental health distress is higher for women. And what's important is not acting only when there's a crisis, but it's a whole journey. So have like the prevention piece of it. I think it's key, and we have through group benefits, we have the AP, employee assistance program that can help. So there's a lot of resources there, but it's not only acting when there's a problem.
Something that we've already touched upon is the notion of flexibility. And I'm wondering for all of you if there's a policy or practice that you've seen really move the needle in terms of helping to provide that flexibility in the workplace for women and gender diverse people.
Maybe I can speak from an employer perspective. There's fitness classes during lunch that was offered, so that's very helpful because at lunch you don't have the kids when you're at work, so it's a good opportunity to take care of yourself. So that's an example. Also, a hybrid work mode. We talked about it, but if you have the chance to have a few days at home, less commute, so that's easier, and flexibility schedule as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are the key elements. But not every organization is able to offer that, is the reality. And we need to start looking at what are some other ways of being able to build in some flexibility when you don't have an ability to do hybrid, or certain roles just can't be that way. And again, I feel that comes from senior management ensuring that they are paying attention to employees at all levels. And within all roles, to make sure that we're not just putting policies in place for head office employees or for a certain key set of employees. So it's looking across everyone at the end of the day.
Yeah, sort of the same thing as well. I mean, some tangible things that you can do. Be intentional with scheduling breaks in your schedule, with meetings, whether instead of being on Zoom, could you go for a walk, get your steps in. So I guess it all depends on organization, like my panelist said.
I do remember coming back from my first mat leave and again having a colleague at the time saying, make sure to take at least 5 minutes of a break during the day, otherwise you will be working at all hours of the day. And I was like, oh, and it's true, right? Just kind of actually building that in as something that is of consequence in the context of your day. I'm wondering, I'm mindful of our time here, but I wanted to touch upon the idea of the invisible load. We talked about, of course, mental health, pressure, and of course how that relates to performance in the workplace as well. And I think that many high-performing women often describe that they're constantly juggling. I certainly relate to that too. Work, caregiving, health, often an internal pressure to be good enough everywhere. And so I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on how working women and gender diverse people can find those pockets of time to prioritize themselves. And again, if you want to draw on a personal experience, please feel free to. If not, that's totally fine. But where, I find sometimes people will say, well, just, take care of yourself. And it's like, what invisible pocket of the day should I be looking towards? Because if or a third arm, that might be helpful. So I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on maybe finding those windows for flexibility.
Well, I think that's a big challenge, and it's a day-to-day battle for me too. So I would say, again, from a Desjardins Insurance perspective, having to educate what's in the group benefit, because it's easily accessible. You have wellness programs, you have everything you need within that, and you know what's being paid for. So I think it's just educating, raise awareness also around your group benefits. And like I said, from an employer perspective, flexibility, I'd say what we've just discussed as well.
I mean, I would say from a personal perspective, and I did it last night. I went out and had dinner with a group of my girlfriends last night. And my advice is fill your cup, right? So fill your cup with whatever that looks like. If it is a walk in the morning, if it is time that you end up spending with your family doing something, find the thing that gives you joy. And I'll be honest, I battled before driving down there to be like, oh my God, I could be doing X, Y, and Z. but you come out of those reminding yourself of the importance of filling your cup. And so I think it's important to schedule that as well. I think that we as women have a tendency of sort of just continuing to add on to our pile of yes, I will, yes, I will. So trying to find a way of putting that in. You would schedule your children's pediatrician appointment, so why wouldn't you do the same thing for yourself, right? So.
Yeah, I like to echo what Sandra said, the exact same thing. I know when patients come in, I'm like, okay, as a doctor, you got to do your 150 minutes a week, 2 or 3 days of resistance training, 7 hours of sleep, no alcohol. I know that's not true because only 20 to 30% actually follow the guidelines. So what are some practical things? Being intentional, like Sandra said, putting some pocket of time in your schedule, spending time with friends, however that looks like for you. And find something that you love, that gives you joy, whether it's 10, 15 minutes of like meditation, doing push-ups in the office, or taking the stairs. No, seriously. Or taking the stairs instead of the escalator if you're physically able to, parking the car a little bit further, taking the TTCs. Just small practical things that's for you and that you enjoy. Because I know life is hard as it is with what you do. You gotta put some time for yourself.
Do you do push-ups at the office?
I did. I do. Depends on how busy I am, but I will do some push-ups and lunges, and 3 times a week I do something.
Awesome.
It's mandatory.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm wondering how important it is for employees to support one another, the importance of peer support, and how organizations perhaps can also encourage this within their organizations.
I think we should start by normalizing those discussions because, like we said, it's not a subject that we discuss a lot at work. So, and as leader, we should create space for those discussions to occur, and we'll figure out that we're not alone. And like you said, sometimes when we discuss with women on a specific topic, it's really helpful and eye-opening on, okay, I'm not alone, I feel supported. So I think it's creating that space between employees that would help as well.
And it's also creating, I think, the boundaries that women need to set for themselves. I think that sometimes this is something we're not good at either. I mean, how many times have I heard, I'm going to be on vacation, but I can take that call? And I'm like, but you're on vacation. Like, you shouldn't have to be taking the call. So we need to set boundaries, but we need, again, as senior leaders, I think we need to make sure that it's clear that that's okay. And, simple things like making sure that you've got, an environment for people to eat together and just be able to engage in conversation and just detract from the day-to-day work heaviness and the load and everything. I think you create those opportunities, you create those environments, and then hopefully people will feel that they are supported and that they can have conversations and help each other.
Yeah, Sandra said it very well. I don't have anything else to add, but if we practice what we preach, I think other people will follow. Yeah, that's it.
We're just getting close to the end here, and so I'm going to ask you a final question. In terms of women's health at work, I'm wondering if there's one shift, cultural, structural, or personal, that you think would most help women not just participate in leadership, but also to sustain it over the long term. Maybe it's the push-ups.
I'll try that.
Are you going to lead us through a group exercise now? I'm just joking.
Well, I think progress will happen not at once, but it's with days like today where we, expose realities of women. That's going to be a step-by-step progress. And also I understood, and I became a better leader when I understood that I can lead without having some pieces of myself, leaving pieces of myself behind, so I can be a mom and a leader. It's not a choice. It's not an or. And I really truly believe in women's leadership. It's a strength for an organization, and for sure we need to continue to discuss about that topic to make progress.
I think for me, it's about supporting one another, and I think sometimes it's also about taking off the filter, right? And what I mean by that is, the Instagram filter where everything looks good and all of that. We can talk about the things that are not going so well as well, and help each other through them. So I think, I find I'm a people leader first. I find it's a great opportunity to be able to talk about the things that aren't as easy. And so I think that we need to continue to support one another through the highs and the lows and be there for one another to keep progressing.
Yeah, I think you said it very well, supporting each other, feeling comfortable, being transparent. It may look different for everybody. But I just think give yourself grace. That's the one thing I would say. Give yourself grace, knowing that you're not going to have it perfectly down-packed, but knowing that you have people at work to support you, people outside of work to support you, so that you continue to thrive in what you're doing and where you're working.
I love the message to end on. I think giving yourself a lot of grace is something I think about a lot as well. So we're coming up on the end of our formal panel discussion, and I think I'll just mention that I think one of the things that was reinforced during our topic discussion today is that, of course, this is not a niche topic or issue. Obviously, this is about leadership and a retention issue. It affects not only health, but the business component that we've discussed as well. And again, our overall well-being. So thank you so much for being on the panel here with me today. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. And I'm going to turn it over now to Dio, who's going to help with some audience questions. So please get your questions ready to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. So yes, if you could. Thank you, Christy. So yes, if you have questions or thoughts, you can put your hand up. Our runners are in the back, and they will come to you. Because as I was sitting there, I'm interested to know who in here is 30-ish and under. Anyone who's just by hands, 30 and under. I want you to understand something. What you heard here, this being your norm, I will reveal now I'm over 30. But this being your norm was not how many of us came up.
Yeah.
This idea of flexibility, come in late because you have issues or none of this. We came up with none of this. Or talk to your mother about perimenopause. None of this. I'm just trying to say, this is excellent advice. And Jennifer Badame and I, Jennifer worked on producing this today. We were sitting back there thinking, to be 20s or in my early 30s now with this as my norm, how it would change the way we would look at work. So please know that for those of you who put up your hands 30 and under, be glad you're in this time and space. Yeah. Because this is groundbreaking business up here. Okay. So who had questions or comments or thoughts? I know I had thoughts back there. Is there any hands up with anyone who has any ideas, thoughts, takeaways? Does anyone agree with me that we're in a moment where this is a standard conversation now? I see you're nodding again. Can I give this to you? I don't know if this is
No, I just think it's fantastic. I've had the pleasure of being here for the last 3 years, and the conversations continue to evolve. And exactly what you said, I have open conversations with my team members all the time, and that wasn't something that was available to me when I first started in my career. So it's just wonderful that we have this space in place to have these conversations. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm interested in anyone who might be, not to age anyone, but someone who might be at the latter part of their careers, just to give a sense of whether this is new, cool, neat. Is this too far on one side of flexibility? Does anyone disagree with the idea of flexibility in the workplace, which would be a controversial thing given what we've heard today? But does anyone have anything else to say on this side? Anyone want to offer a comment? Everyone is so quiet. Oh, there. Thank you. Please stand and state your business.
For the record, I'm not at the end of anything. That's not what I want to talk. No, two little things. One, over COVID, I think one thing that became a thing for me is almost like reverse inclusion. I don't want some people in my team to feel that because they are not parents or because they're not women or because they don't have specific needs, that we're kind of leaning heavier on them. Like I try to talk to my team about, well, everybody has their own personal life. It's not my business to assume that you don't have parents to take care of, or that maybe you spend all day on your pet and that's your right. Like I don't want to put my decision of becoming a parent or my choices in my personal life and my career to be leaning on the shoulders of others that made different choices. So it's almost like a reverse inclusion. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, I don't want to give away my husband, but he has this conservative mindset of, well, we were in office all the time before COVID, and now we're complaining about not having that flexibility. Mm-hmm. And it's just that I don't see I'm a big advocate on personal relationships and in-person benefits for career development and otherwise. But there's that mindset of we're being whiny instead of understanding that this is just better than what we had before.
Right. So Christy had something to say to that.
Oh, I was just reflecting on what you were saying, just about this notion of, not wanting other colleagues to. I remember being that person who was one of the few people. This is at a different newsroom then, but I was one of the few people who didn't have a child, and so I didn't want to be the person who was just like, okay, we're out of here. Well, and because that's just it's a team environment. But I think maybe one of the things I think about a lot, and I think about it maybe just in the context of the reporting that I do, but everyone has health. Everyone has physical health. Everyone has mental health. Everyone has, unfortunately, we navigate crises of different kinds, personal, family, this takes a different shape throughout the course of one's career. And maybe what we're talking about, obviously this is a focus today on women and gender diverse people, but there's also just being a human being who has needs, that I have to tell myself sometimes that in the pace of being a journalist, right? Not a lot of reporters eat lunch. It's like you're often on the phone and you're kind of going with other people's schedules. And so it might take, it's 3:00 and you might be like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten today. That's not a healthy thing to do. I've eaten a lot of granola bars throughout my almost 20 years of being a reporter. So many granola bars, I can't even think about it. But at the end of the day, obviously that's not gonna, I'm just saying health. I try just to look at it with a broader frame that, everyone has inflection points in their lives and careers and are deserving of support. So,
in the spirit of networking, if you could please, when you come up, there's someone at the back who's going to share what company you work with and what you want to say.
Shiva from PwC. I'm part of the cloud data and AI tech. So what I want to say is I have a daughter and I love what I'm hearing because I think the future is changing, which is fantastic. My experience is when I first went for an interview and was 8 months pregnant with my first child, into a large telecom company. I don't want to mention any names. So I was interviewed by a lot of the leaders who were men and one woman. And when I got shortlisted to take the role, one of the things they said is for me to come back after delivering the baby in 2 months. Because my other shortlisters was the guy. And this is back home, not here. And the position was very crucial for my well-being and also for my growth. So I took it and I went back in 2 months. And the same thing happened here when I had my daughter. I had to go back in 2 months because I took the job not knowing I was pregnant, and because there's a big transformation project was depending on me, so I went back in 2 months. So none of the men ever asked me, are you okay? How is your kid? How do you feed? No one had those conversations, which is sad. At the same time, I'm being selfish for myself as well to grow and taking those decisions. I don't blame them entirely, but it's great that right now you're having this conversation because women like us, because especially in the tech industry, it's hard to survive. Now it's a little bit better because you're always judged. You always have to be better than others. When it comes to promotions, you have to tick all the boxes where men would go and ask for promotion without having much, which I see that even right now. So, seeing all that, I think it's very hard as a woman going through all that phase and then go through menopause and still work really hard. So if we can get this implemented in various organizations to have these conversations openly, I think that's a game changer for a lot of us. But the only thing is misusing these opportunities will also have to be prevented because a lot of things happen on the other negative as well, right?
Yeah, we have to wrap this part up, but it's my feeling that everyone in this room who's hearing all of these discussions, and I think even just our people in our age group right now, like we're having those conversations. I leave this conversation feeling hopeful that corporations across Canada and around the world, because of people in this room like us hearing this, will take this forward. That's my hope. I don't know if I'm wrong in that. I hope that that's true. But I think that this panel here really helped to highlight why it's important that we consider flexibility, and as you were saying, not have situations where women are coming back to work after having a baby and then 2 months later they're expected to go back. So thank you to this panel for really bringing some really important, hard, but interesting and crucial thoughts around flexibility in the workplace. So you can stay there. You think we can have some thoughts on it. Thanks. You can stay. So I'm here to tell you that we actually have another networking break, but don't get up yet. I've seen some of you come on the stage and take pictures with your cell phones. I'm here to let you know that you don't need to do that, because if you want to take a group shot, you are welcome to storm the stage one at a time. And Jenna, I don't know, Jenna's in the back there. You've seen Jenna. She is one of our chosen photographers. We've done many things together over many years. Jenna is happy to take group shots of your team if you do want to take one and come up on the stage to do that. So we're going to have a 15-minute break. Please check out the vendors, as I said, small women-owned businesses who are here displaying what they've got. Please check them out, and we look forward to seeing you in 20 minutes. As we settle back in to get into the next section of our program today, we have a couple more segments, really exciting ones. Sandra will be talking to us about career journeys, and we're going to meet someone from the Toronto Tempo. But while everyone's just sitting back down, I had a really quick chat, because one thing that I think unites everybody in here on one level or another is the menopause conversation. It keeps coming up. It gets laughs, as it just did. And I just wanted to have Bizrat real quick give us a little kind of give us a sense of how things have changed. When I was saying for those who are 30 and under, how things are different now. So Bizrat, if you can just come from, she was just chatting. She just told me this, and I was like, please share with the others, just as an example.
So I'm with TELUS Health, and TELUS really does support we have a menopause community. And one day I was kind of surprised to see a little chat pop up. And when I went in it, it was a menopause chat with hundreds of women just chatting about their experiences and sharing resources that we have internally, and just really supporting each other. So really happy to be at a company that supports menopause.
Thank you, Bizrat. So I mentioned this because of the whole, for those who are 30 and under, if you're having menopause chats, imagine what will happen in 30 more years. Really exciting innovations. Like, seriously, it's exciting. So next up, we'll be talking about bridging generations, and which is what we've been talking about, how generations are experiencing this world differently as we continue to use technology and to evolve. And we'll be sharing lessons and hard-won advice on what it means to help open doors for those who are coming up behind you, and the value of mentorship. And one last thing I'll say is, the other day, a couple of people who are older than me by maybe 7, 10-ish years said to me that I'm a mentor to them. So even though we think about mentees being younger than us, let's also remember that we can be mentoring people who are older than us too, in sharing insights with them that are encouraging them in their journey. So I'd like to welcome Sandra Martin from the Globe and Mail as she comes up. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Sandra over the past couple of years. She'll be sitting down with 2 remarkable leaders to explore their career journeys and insights. Thank you, Sandra. If you can welcome her on.
Thanks so much, Deo. As Deo said, I'm Sandra Martin, and I'm standards editor here at the Globe and Mail. And I've been a journalist for, I'm not ashamed to say, more than 30 years. Thank you. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. And in that time, I've done what I like to say is just about every job there is in journalism. I was in magazines, I went to newspapers, I went to broadcast and back again. And in that time, I've learned there are 2 kinds of people in the workplace. There are switchers like me, and there are stayers. And we can learn a lot from both types of people. And luckily, today, we have one of each. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, we have Rachel Wong, who's the co-founder of Monday Girl. and Marnie Ravinovich, who is CEO, founder, and Chief Anti-Chafing Champion at Thighs Society. Now, a little shout out, Thighs Society is one of this year's Globe and Mail Canada's top growing women-led companies, so another round of applause. All right, I know we have a lot to cover. So Rachel, let's just dive in with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your career journey and the origin story of your company?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. It's a beautiful day. I'll quickly share a little bit more about Monday Girl. If you haven't heard, we today are now one of the largest and leading digital networking platforms, media companies, and career conferences for next generation women leaders. The origin story came from a very personal place. I started off my career in a small little company called Uber. Not sure if you guys have heard of it, but this was close to a decade ago, and this is when Uber was still very small, and startup culture was really, really cool and crazy, and I was going to all these networking conferences, and I'd look around the room, and everyone's like, go find a mentor, go network, and it seemed so easy and so great, but I didn't see myself represented. I didn't look at the stage and think, yeah, I really resonate with their journey, or that kind of advice could apply to me. And I realized very early on there was a big gap, and women around me weren't excited about networking. They didn't like that word. And I thought to myself, this had to change. And fast forward today, we are on our path to doing that. So that's Monday Girl.
Amazing, thanks so much. And Marnie? Same.
Well, before I introduce myself, just show of hands if anyone's comfortable sharing. Have you ever been walking on a hot summer day and just felt your thighs rubbing together? And right, show of hands. So at Thigh Society, we've solved for that. 17 years ago, I had the idea for long leg underwear for women that wasn't shapewear, because for myself, I always had thighs that rubbed and touched, and I have sensitive skin. And the minute the weather got warm, I had a rash between my thighs. So that meant I had to wear thick bike shorts, men's underwear, or squeeze into shapewear, all of which I thought were very subpar solutions and that women deserve better. So without any background in intimate apparel, no real business going into this business, quite frankly, but I was a woman with a problem, and as many of us in the room know, when women have an idea, we can set our minds and do anything. And I set out to create a new category of long leg underwear that's comfortable, breathable, cooling, sweat wicking, and just lets you live life more comfortably. That's Thigh Society.
All right, thanks so much for sharing. I want to go next to, you've both made such huge contributions as mentors. And I wanted to talk about the things that distinguish a great mentoring fit, something that will be useful for both people, and one that's not. And sometimes a match that looks good on paper fizzles in real life. Why is that? Do you want to start, Marnie?
Sure. I think the difficult part about finding a mentor is that fit, and someone, like you said, can look good on paper and not be great in real life. In my experience, I've actually just looked for mentors that didn't necessarily have much in common with me per se, but who I heard speak somewhere, who I was inspired by how they spoke, or whose career looked like it followed something atypical and not linear, not necessarily even in my industry, just to understand what made them tick. And so not all mentorship relationships are going to be successful. I think the key is maybe getting out of them when you realize that you're not getting enough out of them, rather than, like picking up a book and just forcing yourself to finish it to the end when really there's so many books to read. Why not just start a new book? So I think it's really also about knowing when it's okay to part ways if it's not a fit.
Right. And Rachel, at Monday Girl, do you have best practices that help to guide the folks on both sides of the relationship to having a successful match?
I keep on stealing Marnie's, but that's because I'm just very excited. So I think the really interesting thing is, and I'm just curious to show of hands, who here manages slightly younger teams or those who are more next gen? I think the really interesting thing that I talk about when I talk to these leaders is the fact that a lot of these younger folks, they came to the workforce during periods of, COVID, remote work. They're navigating workplaces in a very, very different environment. And a lot of them don't necessarily know what it's like, right, to be in an office. And I think when it comes to the idea of mentorship, they're entering a very different period in time of change. So I would say that the main thing that we really look at is redefining what it means to them. I think so often when you think of mentorship, especially when you're younger, you think of this like picture of this person who's older than you and super cool and like holds your hand the entire way. Maybe they're with you for the course of 10 years. And we all know that's not true, right? You know, mentorship can look very different. It could be peer. I know, for example, mentioning it could be someone that's, you know, younger than you, but I would say that it's being very open to what we like to call like what you would say to be your personal board of advisors. Who can you count on for different parts of your life? And some that can be personal, some that can be professional, and it's going to keep changing as you grow and evolve. So I think that's really important for us to share with those who come into Monday Girl. It's not gonna be this one person that guides you. It could be multiple people at different stages.
Right, and you've said it doesn't have to look just one way. So it isn't, you have to have an appointment in your calendar once a month at the same time for the same duration. Can you talk a bit more about that? And then Marnie, I'd like to hear from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say, especially, and to kind of focus in and more about this turbulent time that we're in, we recently ran a report about women in the workplace, very focused on AI, and the stats aren't surprising, right? We found that a lot of younger professionals, they're very scared about the uncertainty that comes with AI. They're also very nervous about saying that they actually use it. And there's stats that show that women, especially those who are younger in their careers, are scared to admit that they actually use it versus their male counterparts. A lot of them don't feel comfortable using it, right? So when it comes to kind of these sort of themes, we just have to recognize that it's a very different time. Sometimes the advice that they might be getting from more, say, tenured or senior folks might not totally resonate. So I think a lot of it is, you know, being more open to the peer conversations. What does that, you know, both ways kind of mentorship look like? There's a lot of things that from a mentor perspective, you can gain a lot from listening to mentees. So I think just really reshaping what that looks like and knowing when to move on is really important too.
All right, and Marnie, as an entrepreneur, do you find that other entrepreneurs or those who would like to become entrepreneurs come to you, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs. And actually, a lot of those relationships have evolved pretty organically. So rather than someone reaching out to me and saying, will you be my mentor? A lot of times we meet in an event and we strike up a conversation, and then they follow up a couple weeks later and want to have a Zoom call or a coffee chat, and then the relationship sort of just evolves over months. I may not hear from them. And I find that works really well for me, and it works well for them. So there's such thing as, informal mentoring. There's some great structured mentoring programs like through Monday Girl, and through informal mentoring, it doesn't feel on my end that it's putting undue pressure on my workload. It doesn't make them feel like they're asking too much of me and my time. It's kind of like dating in a way, right? You don't want to ask someone to marry you on the first date. You're going to sort of date a little bit and see if you like each other and what the fit is, and go from there.
What, and for both of you, would you say is the best way for someone who wants to have a coffee chat or perhaps consider a mentorship relationship? What is the best way for them to approach you? What do you think works well? And when I say you, I mean what works in the world as well.
Well, I can put my former career as an MBA career coach hat on. And my one rule of thumb is that everybody likes to talk about themselves. And what's the one subject we all know best? Ourselves, our careers. So I find the best way to approach someone when you want them to mentor you or you want advice is to approach them by asking them to talk about something they know best, which is their experience. And that's just going to endear you to them. They're going to feel comfortable talking about a topic they know really well, rather than something abstract that you might be asking about. And from there, the conversation will evolve and you'll probably get your questions answered. But I find like the approach is really just to put the spotlight on the person that you want to mentor you and let them just share.
And I would say when it comes to cold outreach, we often hear from younger folks that it's so hard to get a response back, right? I've tried, I put it out there. And the real question I'm sure everyone here is thinking is like, what does that outreach look like, right? Does it look like the same? Does it look like a very generic message that you could have shot out to like 100 different people? Is there M dashes everywhere and it's very obvious that it's this AI, not personalized? So I do think in the world where, we're so conflated with this idea that there's so much information, there's so much out there, how do we even get a shot of, being heard? The reality is that's not true. I'm sure a lot of us would give our time very gladly if the outreach was personal. It showed that they actually knew who you were, their interest in your career journey. And we often share, there's a lot of free ways to do that, simply just by, liking a person's comment, right, on LinkedIn, or engaging with their articles, or even noticing the fact that, like I saw you spoke here and I love what you said about this. So there's a lot of small little ways to do that, but I do think that's kind of, why we're here. A lot of you guys are going to be leading this next generation. A lot of that tactical advice that seems obvious might not be so obvious because we enter the workforce in such a different time period. So that's kind of what we like to share.
Yeah. And on that note, are there systems within most workplaces that could function in a similar way, and perhaps there are people who aren't using it optimally?
Yeah, I would say we get to go to so many different organizations, and it's so interesting to learn more about, say, employee resource groups that they have, or even formal mentorship programs. The one thing I'd call out is that, it's really important for both, of course, the person leading whatever resource group or whatever mentorship program to make sure that they have the right support and the right backing, right? And having the right championship is very important. So often do I see these very, very tired and stressed out leaders who want to be doing something on the side of their actual jobs, and they're being told to do something way bigger than that. So I think making sure that there's enough championship for these groups, also partnering with organizations that really get it. Besides Monday Girl, of course, I'd like to plug that, but there's so many organizations that you can partner with that can also kind of be that outlet for you and support you versus feeling like you have to put all these hats on.
Yeah. Marnie, you've used the term, and I've never heard this before, I think it's great, intrapreneur. Can you talk about that and how that can help set someone up for future success?
Sure. So I don't think I made up the term intrapreneur, but I heard it somewhere and it stuck with me. And I see intrapreneur as someone who is operating like an entrepreneur within a corporate setting. So it's not necessarily something you founded or an idea that you brought to market, but it's a program or a policy or anything really, project that you're working on internally in your organization. And for me personally, I've had quite a few career pivots, 3 different careers before Thigh Society. And I like to say that I was an intrapreneur at each one of the organizations and in each role that I had. And I explain that by saying that I never took roles over from other people. So there was never a transition period that I had with someone whose role I was coming into. I was assigned roles that were new to the company, that had no precedent setting, where I really had this blank slate to decide how I wanted to operate and do the role. And it was definitely scary. I'm not going to lie. I had some really great mentors and champions at these organizations who, believed that I could do it. And essentially that was my training ground for entrepreneurship, because it got me the ability to become comfortable with discomfort. I think whenever any of us embarks on something new, it's normal to be nervous, fearful, uncertain if you can do the job. But, the more you do something, the more you practice and get better at it, the more you build that confidence and knowing that you can do it. So I think I became very comfortable with discomfort, which is a core skill, I think, of being an entrepreneur, more so than the perception we have of entrepreneurs being risk takers. It's more getting comfortable with the uncertainties and not knowing what comes next. So I'm also a big proponent of not quitting one's day job. I worked full-time for 7 years while I was building Thigh Society. And I think it's a great opportunity to have a paycheck that is steady. When you're first starting a business, you don't have that. And it's the security of being able to operate in an organization that has defined processes, that has a path forward, that has resources and mentors and managers that you can learn from is really a safe space, if you will, to continue building that muscle of discomfort.
There are also ways, you said, to be an entrepreneur without necessarily getting the promotion to step into. So can we talk a bit about that?
Well, I mean, I think further to what Rachel said before, a lot of people don't take initiative. So if you want to stand out in your organization, just raise your hand. Just say, I want this project, or I have an idea for how we can improve this process. Because most managers aren't going to say no to that. They're going to welcome your curiosity and your willingness to try something new. And I think, we talked about this a little bit in our prep call. I think there's a lot of glorification in the media of entrepreneurship. And let me tell you, it's not a lot of glory. It's nice to get the accolades for sure, but it's a lot of work. And you can still have a really rewarding and fulfilling career by contributing to an organization and putting your own unique stamp on whatever it is that you're building within your company. So really, a lot of the time, it's just a matter of saying, I'm okay with taking on something brand new. I'm okay with charting a new path and figuring this out as I go. And just being willing to do that and step up will separate you from probably 95% of the company.
And Rachel, what advice would you give for people who might be thinking, okay, I know I need to do this. I know I deserve to step forward and take this space, but oh my gosh, I'm terrified, or I'm introverted and this doesn't come naturally for me. What could help them step into that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the first thing is just recognizing where your communication and strength styles lie. I think that self-reflection is really, really important, because the reality is that being an introvert is a very powerful thing, right? I know we live also in a time where glorification of not just entrepreneurs, but people who are very good for, advocating for themselves in a verbal way, right? Or being very loud in a room. And I would say that's definitely not true. I'm sure, again, a lot of the leaders here feel that way. So it's a matter of just recognizing what your strengths are. So for example, for me, I recognize that, if there's times where I feel like I really have to recognize my own work, I'm great at writing things out. I can write a killer email, awesome report. Let me show my data that way. Let me show my wins that way, right? So it's really encouraging that your team leans into those strengths and understands where that is, maps it out in their best way possible. But it's also the job of the managers to making sure that they recognize that, and making sure that rooms where maybe you do have to speak up a little bit more, they give you that space. So I do think it's a two-way conversation when it comes to that.
Anything to add to that, Marnie?
Nope, that's great.
All right. So let's move on. Let's switching gears a little bit. With the rise of uncertainty in the world, which we've touched on, and in business, the ability to navigate change has become more important. I think this maybe touches on what you were saying, Marnie, about being comfortable with discomfort. Let's talk about what people can take away today that would help prepare them for that, sort of navigating uncertainty and being comfortable with discomfort.
So I actually was speaking to a coach yesterday. She's not my coach, but I might hire her after the conversation yesterday, who brought up something really interesting when we were talking about fear. And so we're talking about navigating uncertainty. And she said, fear is really our ego's way of protecting us. It's our ego's way of saying, just be cautious because we don't want you to get hurt. But a lot of time, the ego's operating from past experiences, and we learn from every experience, and we're confident with each experience. So I think a lot of navigating change and becoming more comfortable is calling out and having compassion for our ego that may make us feel afraid or scared, but also it's almost like talking to your inner child, for anyone who's done, psychological work and things like that, of just acknowledging the fear, recognizing it's the ego trying to protect us, and telling the ego it's okay. I've learned, I'm a different person now, I know what I'm doing, or I'm going to learn as I go, and just to calm the fears down, because I think fear is a natural part of being human. It's really more about whether or not we let it overtake us or not.
Right, and as you've talked about with your transition to entrepreneurship, that doesn't mean you need to take a leap without a net.
Yeah, no.
Rachel, I wanted to talk a little bit about, Marnie is a switcher like me, you're maybe a stayer. Can you talk a little bit about how you created those opportunities for yourself, how you found ways to embrace change while you were working for several years at the same companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the interesting part is that, if you told me when we first heard Monday Girl as an idea and concept, that it was going to be a full-blown business with 6 people on my team, I would have told you you're crazy. I did come from a family of entrepreneurs, which is funny. I think because of that, I was like, I'm never going to be a founder. My parents didn't send Christmas with me. They made me like wrap things for like, inventory and packaging. So it's really interesting now to kind of be in that same spot. But the interesting thing is that when I first started, my career in tech, there was so much noise and buzz over fundraising. There was so much noise and buzz about what it meant to start a really cool killer company. And I think sometimes the good thing about waiting it out is that you get to see waves come and go. So we saw that with Monday Girl. We saw that, we're able to kind of build the audience in the background, prove the MVP, mind you, probably a longer time than we thought it would be. We spent, years and years building all the report, building the audience. And then when we finally took the lead to kind of launching that paid first product, that response was overwhelming. And I think people saw where it was coming from. We really understood the problem. We really understood the audience. And having that 9 to 5 actually became that alternative source of fundraising. So I was kind of able to learn also from these people really where I wanted to go. I had incredible mentors at Uber. I was able to take on many different hats. So for example, I realized that, operations was something I really wanted to lean into. There's a lot of stuff I had to do with Monday Girl. So I kind of put that hat on, got to learn, got to do it in the job. So then that way, when I actually took that full leap into doing Monday Girl full time, it became much easier. So I kind of joked it was like my executive MBA, if you will.
Is there value in accepting role changes within your company that aren't necessarily moving you up the ladder, but are maybe lateral?
Absolutely. I took many lateral shifts. And I think for those who have worked at startups, that's constant, right? Like you're constantly asked to do more scope changes, take on more, take on a different team. And the mentality is saying yes and being really excited about it, although it can be so scary, is so key because the things that you learn and also like you reinventing the way that you can look at it, like your perspective is always going to be the most valuable thing. You coming from a different part of the organization, having that lens and bringing it to like a whole different team, like that's really, really groundbreaking because you can be able to clear up some confusion between different departments that might never speak. And the second thing too is you bring a really cool POV. So I would say absolutely leaning into that. But of course, being really, really clear on what you want out of it. For me, it was really, really important that I was able to learn how to manage a team. So understanding how I could path myself there, even though we didn't have a formal ladder, it was important for me to ask those questions and see the leaders in front of me if that was actually the case for them too, because that's a better example for you than actually seeing it in a paper. So,
Marnie, you made a point that I think some people might initially find kind of surprising, that you don't have to get everything that you want from your career out of your job. And it's okay to have a job that's just okay. I think I'm seeing like around the room. I thought it was really interesting. Can you talk about that for a bit?
It's a controversial opinion, but we're all multifaceted individuals, and some of us are lucky enough to land in careers or jobs that are immensely fulfilling personally and professionally, and others are in jobs that pay the bills and are fulfilling, but you're really looking forward to going home and picking up that piece of art that you were working on or going to that dance class. And I think as a society, we should be normalizing all parts of ourselves and not just career as a measure of success and what brings us joy and what fulfills us. And for me personally, I know I was acutely aware of this from very early on in my career because working in a corporate environment at Accenture, it was very clear that there was a progression from consultant up to manager, up to senior manager, et cetera. And the irony is I didn't want to lead teams. And I realized early on that I was most happy as an independent contributor, where I had my own projects that were undefined, where I could decide how I wanted the project to go. It wasn't that I wasn't a team player. It's just that I wasn't excited by the idea of what I needed to do to get promoted. And I also realized that I had hobbies and liked my life outside of work. And so, that thread, if you will, of really staying true to myself and what I wanted my career to do for me, still held true as I started Thigh Society. So there's, a lot of narratives in entrepreneurship that, you start off and you're hustling, working 80 hours a week and you're getting venture capital, you're raising money. I didn't want the business to, I wanted the business to work for me, not the other way around. Certainly there have been times, especially in the last couple of years, where I've been working a lot. But for the majority of the last 17 years, I've been able to run the business in a way that works for me, where I'm not glorifying hustle culture. I'm not saying I'm working 80 hours a week and wearing that as a badge of honor. There is no badge of honor in working 80 hours a week. You can't take it with you when you're gone, right? Whatever it is you're working for. And so I just think it's important to really know yourself and figure out where does career fit into your life, and what do you most need in order to be fulfilled. If that's leading people and mentoring and leading teams, then yes, you're going to want to pursue those opportunities that allow you to do that. If running your own show and being an entrepreneur, or running your own projects with outside help, that's a different career path, and that's going to be okay, because at the end of the day, you have to sleep at night, right? It's really about you.
Yeah, and you've said that you've observed a lot of women, well, a lot of people in general, don't spend a lot of time thinking about what they want. What does success look like for me? What will that feel like for me?
For sure. I mean, is it title? Is it financial, right? At the end of the day, I think most of us, when we've looked at financials, probably know what our baseline is for what we want to be able to live the life that we want to lead. And I think that's important as a starting point, to know what is your enough. And it reminds me, I met a billionaire with a B back in January, Andrew Wilkinson, who's like this tech billionaire. And he just wrote a book whose title I'm going to miss, but I think it's something like How Much Is Enough, or What's Your Enough? And he sort of, every time he engages with someone new, he starts the conversation by, do you have enough? What's your enough? And I was like, Andrew, my enough was, 5 years ago or 7 years ago when we hit $1 million. Like, I would have never in my wildest dreams have assumed that Thigh Society could get that big. And here we are today at 40 million. And so I said, my enough is long in the past. I'm doing this for fun now. Like, this is great. And he's like, this is good, because many people, whether you're an entrepreneur in your career, just keep going blindly without really checking in with yourself of like, have I made it? Like, if me 10 years ago, or teenage me, would look back and ask myself, is this good enough? Most of the time it probably is. So is it worth the hustle? Is it worth the grind? I'm not saying give up. I'm saying be very intentional about where you put your time. And if that's in your career, make sure that what you're doing is filling you up, or at least filling you up enough to support your other things outside of work.
All right. So kind of a connected question. When do you know when it's time to move to your next step, whether that's being an entrepreneur or going outside of the organization you are now, or becoming an entrepreneur? And how can you tell if you've been in one place too long?
Sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes you're like, I think this is great. And you kind of look around, everyone else is staring at you being like, it's time for you to go, right? So I do really think that it's important to have those people that you trust in your corner, completely transparently. I was ready to keep going, right? I thought I was going to climb that ladder until I actually had, again, a very dear mentor of mine come up to me and say, I think it's time for you to go. I really think you've done all the things that you really wanted to do. You're going to keep moving the goalposts, right? Like, first I was like, it's going to be 1 million in revenue. Then I was like, no, let's do 2. Well, how about hitting this, right? So it's going to keep changing. So I think if you're like me and you kind of need that reassurance, making sure you have a really strong group of people that you care about, people that know you and your goals, that's very important. And I say the second thing too is making sure that you are thinking through your values, right? So it's again, very much to Marnie's point, is this a life that you really want for yourself, right? Is this really what you want to achieve? The reality is that things are temporary, right? If you wanted to go do the thing, you could always go back to a great job, right? You're very talented, you're very capable. If you wanted to go inwards, right? If you wanted to leave the thing that you wanted to do and then go somewhere else, you're never starting from zero. You're never starting from scratch. Everything you take with you is incremental. So I know in our heads, we talk a lot about fear and change. The reality is we're in a world where we have so much access, and it's, up to us to make the most out of it. So I'd say just having a really good group of people that can cheer you on in the meantime is super key.
Yes, and I would say I'm the queen of staying places too long. Before I went full-time on Thigh Society, I was working as a career coach for MBA students at the Rotman School of Management, and I loved the job. I loved coaching students. It was one of the most fulfilling careers I've had. But I was growing Thigh Society at the same time, and I started to wonder, am I ever going to go full-time on this? And I don't know if I have the guts to be a full-time entrepreneur. It seems so risky. And I'd already been a career coach by that point for about 5 years, 6 years. And I thought, well, I don't even know if I'm marketable anymore. What if Thigh Society fails? What if I quit my secure pensioned job, pursue Thigh Society, and then it flops? So what I did was a little bit of an internal test where I went out and I interviewed for jobs at the big banks, big consulting firms, just to make sure that I was still marketable, to prove to myself that the risk of quitting and pursuing Thigh Society wasn't actually as big a risk in my head or in reality as it was in my head. Because if I was still marketable, I'd still be marketable in a year. And so for me, I needed that internal proof. It didn't matter what anyone else was telling me. I needed to know that the market would still see my skills as valuable. So I did that. I had 3 job offers, turned them all down, stayed another year at U of T because I was still afraid to go full-time on Thigh Society. And that was 10 years ago. So quit and never look back.
So you each started companies that solved a problem that you had identified. I wonder what you think about, I don't know if you watch the same drivel I do online, but you hear about all of these practical businesses. So people, becoming extremely wealthy and successful because they take on, a widget making factory. What's your take? We're all friends here, so.
I mean, the reality is when you're an entrepreneur or founder, you're going to be like, wow, there's so many amazing things. That's probably what makes you like a founder, right? You get excited about ideas. You get excited about solving problems. So I'd say like every single day, we probably have like a million things that we're like, we should be doing this, right? And then we'll go to a party or a conference and everyone's like, have you thought about doing this? We're like, yeah, like 10 years ago, right? So I think the main thing for us is like being really, really true to the problem that we really care about. There's so many problems, obviously, that like, we're like, that's cool. I wish we owned a laundromat. That'd be amazing. It prints money, apparently, right? So I think the main thing for us is, I felt this problem, right? Like almost now, actually, I think it was 9 years ago with Monday Girl. And I would say unfortunately, it's still very much something that we see every single day being such a need. We hear amazing stories of people telling us that they got new job offers. They felt the confidence to leave a toxic job. They were able to negotiate. They were able to move into different departments they never thought they would. And that's the kind of fuel that keeps us going, right? Because to Marty's point, being a founder is definitely not glamorous. A lot of times people will see social media and think it's amazing and glorified. You win these awards, but the reality, a lot of it is, a lot of like soul searching, a lot of late nights. So you have to make sure that the problem that you're working on is something you're deeply passionate about. And if other people come into the market and they try to solve your problem too, that's great. That should be ammo because you should all try to be the ones working on it together. So,
yeah. I mean, business isn't easy, but if you're solving a real problem for people, it certainly makes the job easier. For me, I admittedly did not want to have anything to do with being in intimate apparel manufacturing. I grew up with a lot of friends whose parents had been in the industry, and it's tough. But sometimes ignorance is bliss. So I knew a little bit, and I was just looking around saying, why isn't anyone else solving this problem for women? Like, this is not complicated. This is a basic human right that we deserve long leg comfortable underwear. Why isn't anyone doing this? And so I felt compelled to it. And it's hearing from customers about how we're making their life easier, more comfortable, dispelling myths that thigh chafe has anything to do with your weight, which it does not, because women are always told to shrink our bodies all the time, and enough with that. So that's I'm clearly very passionate about not just the quality of our products, but the problems that our products solve, and normalizing a situation that we've been told to stigmatize for so many years. And sweating is just a normal condition of human body. So, I think being passionate about what you do is important, making sure that there's a need for your product, that you're going to be able to monetize it, because otherwise it's just a hobby, and there's nothing wrong with a hobby, but you don't have to necessarily give up your day job for a hobby. And so I think, yes, there's a lot of people that do go into business just to make a quick buck, but when the going gets tough, it's much easier to, know that you have a market, proof of concept, and that you care about what you're doing. It certainly makes it easier.
All right, thanks. We've got a couple more minutes, and I hope you'll each leave us with a thought of going back to the importance of connection. If you were to leave this group with one thing to think about for improving the connections in their lives and their careers, what would that be? No pressure.
I know, I'm thinking. Yeah. Improving the connections in their lives.
I mean, you said something about, you touched on this today about the use of LinkedIn, and probably everyone here has a LinkedIn profile. Is there something they could do to make it work better for them?
Can I go with the most obvious? Update it.
Yes.
I know we all have thought about it, but maybe this is actually your sign to go update it. And also just get really, really clear in that first sentence that comes in your bio. I know it's probably outdated, right? So probably just really think twice about, what your mission is, who you stand for. Just really think about it as your mission statement, and hopefully that comes clear through your headline and also the first sentence of your bio.
All of that. And I will say, LinkedIn has come such a long way. When I think back to my career coaching days 15, 20 years ago, I was encouraging all my students to have a LinkedIn profile and update their bio and have their, make it like their digital resume. But LinkedIn now is a community where you can stand out as a thought leader. And if you feel like you don't have much to say, you can engage with others on LinkedIn and comment on their posts. And especially if you're looking to make connections, one of the easiest ways to do that is to build a relationship with them online over time. Not in a stalkery, creepy kind of way, but just, engaging with their content, engaging in conversation, seeing who they're following, and starting to put things up on LinkedIn that, reflect your point of view. Because nowadays, I think all employers will search a candidate for any sort of job and see what your LinkedIn profile says. And you don't want it to just be, standard, oh, okay, there's no red flags here. What if it could be a really big green flag for you? What if there's actually great content on there that someone gets excited about and wants to meet you?
All right, well, thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to audience questions, but first I want to say thank you, Rachel and Marnie, for being so frank and open and just wonderful. I think we've really enjoyed this conversation, so thank you.
Very interesting conversation, and we're going to go straight to audience questions. I know that if you have any thoughts or reflections, just put up your hand up. We have our floaters coming around again with microphones. Was there anything that you heard in this chat that's like, oh yeah, I felt that way, or no, I didn't feel that way? We want to hear it. Jennifer Badame, who is the producer of today's event, has been watching our virtual audience and has some comments that she is going to read to us.
Thank you, Dio. One question is about individual contributor, which you mentioned. Many organizations expect you to become a people manager to advance. Is there a career path for individual contributors?
Who would like to take that?
I can take that. I mean, I don't think there's a clear path. I think it depends on your organization, and sometimes you might have to switch organizations in order to follow the career path that you want. In my experience, having proposed 2 brand new roles that didn't exist in 2 separate organizations, I'm an optimist. And I think if you see opportunity for an independent contributor role that doesn't exist, why not build a business case and try to sell it to your manager, right? If you're proposing something that suits your needs and it solves a problem for the business, what do you have to lose by proposing that?
I'll also add on, I think the trend too is shifting towards more ICs. I've seen that over the course of time. I think especially tech companies are downsizing and they're looking to their teams to be more lean with more tools. So I think the main thing here is actually thinking about where the future is going to go. A lot of us will need to be AI fluent, so leaning on those tools and understanding what that means and future-proofing yourself, because I do think the future is actually going to be much more IC focused.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not sure, as Jennifer looks, I think there might be a second question that you have, but while we wait for that, I wondered if there was anyone in particular, because I know Monday Girl, you focus on a different way of networking for a younger audience, and I just really want to encourage those in the spirit of someone who said back there they want to take up space. This is not a space just for people of a certain age. If you are in your 30s and your 20s and you have something you want to say, we want to hear it. We want to know what you think. I know that you would too. There's a young woman who I met back there who's looking to do her journalism. She's actually a young journalist in training, and she might have a question, so you can, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot. You might have something that you want to bring to the audience here today, some thoughts.
I think I do want to think a little bit longer, but I
yes,
may have a question.
As you should. No worries. But if you do, not to pinpoint, but I just wanted to encourage. So Jennifer, did you have another question?
Yes. Is this on? Yeah. From the virtual audience, for women to be seen and get promoted, I think, it's from the audience. Communication is essential. Based on my experience and observation, women are too nice or do not want confrontations. Men can easily verbally say things with utter disregard and get away with it. My question is, how can women communicate effectively in a team dominated by men and led by a man wherein so she can really be heard?
Oh, great question. I think communication has to come from a place of authenticity. And so I think you'll only be successful in your comms if it feels natural to you, because many of us can't just go off a script, and a script might work for one meeting, but what happens when you have to go off script in another meeting? So a key part of it is finding your own voice and what that looks like for you, not necessarily trying to mirror the dude bros in the room. And I think women, I don't really love to go based on gender lines, but use whatever your superpower is to connect with your audience, and whatever makes you authentic, lean into that. Don't try to change to mimic someone else's style.
Also, I would say do some deep reflection on the environments that you're in, right? Because the reality is, if you lean into being really authentic and your superpower, you should be able to get heard, right? It shouldn't just be about mimicking the dude bros in the room, and please don't do that, because that sets a really bad precedent for all the future leaders that are going to come into your spot. So I would say just reflecting on the environments that you're in and setting that example too.
Thank you so much. And for the audience here, these two are amazing at career advice. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to ask those.
Any other questions from the audience? There's one at the back here. If you can keep her hand up as the runner comes around. I just also want to recognize, I realized at the end while she was up there that I've seen Marnie before, because you also won at the Ernst & Young Entrepreneurship of the Year Award this year. Yes. No, last year. I hosted that last year, October 2025, and Marnie also won that too. So she's been well recognized there too.
It takes a village. It takes a village.
So my name's Deb, and my question is more from the perspective of, like, say you're a young mentor, you're not a mentee anymore, and people are reaching out to you to mentor. How do you socialize that to your upward leaders, that, you know, there are this group of individuals who are reaching out to me, so they know that you have this eminence, and how do you build on that?
Yeah. First off, that's amazing, right? Like, taking time to recognize that. That's absolutely a statement and testament to how you're seen in the organization. That is absolutely something your manager should also take into account too, right? You know, sharing that, quite frankly, even the way that you shared with us was perfect, right? So I think there's things that you can do, and let me know if, like, this is answering your question. Is it more so about finding the right way to spend your time, to be able to, you know, take into account all these different coffee chats you're going to have? Is there a program that you can plug into? If there isn't one already at your organization, maybe looking at something like a Monday Girl, right, where you can tell them and redirect them. I think so often we hear with people who apply to be a Monday Girl mentor, it's because they are inundated with so many great requests, and they need to find a way to streamline their time. But if that's kind of not the concern, it's more so about making sure your manager knows that. I think it's great feedback, and it's such a testament to, obviously, your impact at work. So
Great. We have a question from Taya, who, thank you for playing with me. I met Taya in line, and it turns out she also has Barbadian background, so that was our connection for today. So thanks again for asking, and I look forward to hearing what you have to ask.
Yeah, so I'm graduating from University of Toronto Journalism this year. I almost have a kind of a question about tips about just being nervous about asking questions, actually. But
you're doing great.
Yeah,
Woo, doing great. Woo. Let's give her encouragement. Yes.
Thank you. With AI, my generation, it's so easy to think of ideas, and they won't be as unique because you know we have so much things to help us. But how do you, I guess, put your ideas out there and not feel guilty with, you know, using your resources to help you with those ideas?
Before you answer, wasn't that a great question? Can we give her encouragement again? That was fabulous. Thank you, Taya.
I mean, I think, great question. I think AI is a tool that all of us are going to be using within the next 5 years, if not sooner. So I don't think it's going to be a negative. And I think of AI like an assistant to bounce ideas off of, the same way I would think about a team member or calling a friend or a group chat. So if you reframe it in your mind of just this is something that's available to help you, then there shouldn't be any shame or any second guessing around, asking your question. And truthfully, if you have a question, chances are 5 other people in the room have the same question. You're just going to be the one that raises your hand to ask, which will allow you to stand out. So half of the battle is just having the confidence to ask.
Sandra, maybe you can offer some perspective to Taya also as a journalist of 30 years. Confidence in asking questions and any advice?
Yeah, and I also taught journalism at TMU, and you're not alone. I think the more you do it, as somebody who is naturally somewhat shy and introverted, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So kudos to you again for saying, yes, I'm gonna accept the challenge and I'm gonna ask a question. You're in a really interesting time to be entering a journalism career because a lot is changing, and the fact that you're ready to go with the flow and you're embracing the new tools, I think puts you in a really good position.
Great. We have time for one more question if there's anything that there's one here at the front. We have like 45 seconds, but we'll do our best to make this tight.
Thank you. I'll make it quick. As a mentee as well, being under 30, I will say it was a very overwhelmingly positive experience being here today. But sharing of that same note, being in a space filled with very influential, positive women, it can feel intimidating at times to put yourself out there, being a natural introvert. So any tips on that? And a follow-up question to that, I know LinkedIn is a space that we use for maintaining those connections. Other than interacting with posts and those things, what are other strategies you might suggest to maintain those connections with other people?
We have 45. I'll be really quick. Mine is very tactical. It's called the holiday hack. Anytime you see a holiday and there's someone that you haven't connected with in a while, use that holiday to be your reason, right? So it's like happy St. Patrick's Day, whatever it is, make it more tactical, make it make more sense. But it's like, hey, notice that you got promoted, right? Congratulations. Whatever it is, that's your reason, because sometimes we have, connections that go cold. Use that to kind of reactivate.
That's it. That's what we have. Thanks a lot to this great panel. As we're transitioning the stage, because we took a little bit of extra time on that, I had all of this material to talk about how clumsy I was, and you saw me trip, and then how I probably am not someone, and I'm short, even though this looks tall, I'm really short. So basketball is probably not my sport. But how many of us in here remember when the Raptors were an idea, much less a basketball team? And now we're at a time where the Toronto Tempo, how many of you are excited for the actual possibility that we're going to have a women's basketball team in Toronto? So here to give us a bit of a scoop on what's happening behind the scenes and to close out the day about women leadership on the court, on the basketball court, I'm here to introduce Rachel Brady, sports reporter at the Globe and Mail, and she'll be sitting down with Whitney Bell. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at the Toronto Tempo. What a job. You have a lot to do. We look forward to hearing this conversation.
Here, there we go.
Hello.
Hi, Whit.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for coming today. My name's Rachel. I'm a sports reporter here at the Globe. If you're a Globe reader, chances are you see my byline in the paper. And one of the big, exciting things that I'm covering this summer is the Toronto Tempo. It's probably no news to anybody else that in Canada, a WNBA team is coming this summer to the court.
It's very exciting.
So Whitney's here to talk about it. Some of you were expecting Teresa Rush today, the president of the team. Well, guess what? This is a busy, busy time in the WNBA. As probably you saw in the news, the WNBA and their players struck a very transformative new collective bargaining agreement recently. And while they were negotiating that, things kind of came to a halt and everybody was waiting. So all the player movement couldn't happen during that time. So guess what is happening now with a month to go?
So yeah, surprise, I'm here.
So Whitney's here.
Our free agency, everything got pushed back. So Teresa's somewhere in North America, courting players, bringing them to our team. So I'm standing in for her today.
Doing really important work of getting that roster filled out. But Whitney's also in the thick of this, trying to get the court because the debut is going to be May 8th. So that's not a lot of time to put together a team. The first 11 players came together just last week on Friday through the expansion draft. And so there's training camp to come. There's a draft to come. There's an arena to get ready. There's training camp to do. And you've got a long list of things going as well.
Yeah, it's never a dull moment. It kind of freaks me out that today is the 30-day mark. So we tip off May 8th, Coca-Cola Coliseum. Still have a lot to do.
Chief Marketing Officer here for the team. So she's not on the court, she's off the court doing all that stuff. So we're going to learn a little bit about her job and her journey to get there. Maybe you can bring us up to speed on how you landed in this role. What was the journey to getting to this role?
Yeah, I would say I definitely did not have a traditional path to a sports franchise. I grew up playing all the sports, loved sports. I played varsity soccer at university level. But I'd never really imagined, for whatever reason, a career in sports after university. So I started my career in the consumer packaged goods world, worked at Kraft and then Unilever for about 10 years. And that was really where I really learned a lot. I really grew up at those companies. And after 10 years in CPG, I was craving something just a bit more fast-paced, and I made the jump to the tech side. So I got to launch Lyft, the ride-sharing company, into Canada, which was a great opportunity. And then I loved it so much, I was like, let's go even earlier stage startup. So then I went to a Series A tech startup. And then I was on mat leave, actually, with my second son. He was about 4 months old, and we were out for a walk one day, and I got an email from a recruiter. And it was about a month after the team had been announced that it was coming to Toronto. And honestly, I thought it was a prank at first. I was just like, what? What is this role? And he sent me an email and told me about the details. And I was just so excited because this was literally my dream role. It was marrying building a brand with the startup factor. There's a misconception that this team is part of MLSC, but it's actually completely independent. So very, very much a startup mentality.
So you came not from a sports, obviously as an athlete, that played a big role in your passion, right? But not a sports career to that point.
No, the only experience I'd had is when I was at Unilever, and some of my other experiences, we did partnerships with sports franchises, but I had never worked directly for that. So coming in, I was very transparent in a lot of my interviews, just like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want someone that hasn't worked for a sports team? And they were great. And they said, no, we're actually looking for someone that has a bit of an outsider's perspective, that can bring in some fresh thinking and is used to this very much a startup pace and mentality. So I was employee number 4. We're now about 50 employees total, so continuing to grow.
I see this more and more when I cover teams, that people are drawn to sports from other industries, and the fresh mindset of how business is done somewhere else. I see this a lot. I end up interviewing a lot of people that have come from other industries to sport with fresh eyes and a fresh take on things. Having played sports yourself, where do you think that, where does that live inside of you? How do you maybe utilize that? And do you see that a lot among your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the skills I learned just as an athlete, I use all the time. So whether it's collaboration, I think sports just helps instill some confidence as well. You see the stat that 92% of women in leadership roles played sports. And it doesn't have to be high-level sports, but just some sports. So I think that's played a big role. And then also just in the passion. I think you have to love it a little bit. And you know, when I got this role, it was really a dream job for me just to be part of this. I could never have dreamed of something more impactful I could be part of.
I wonder if that bears out in this room. A lot of sports participants when you were younger here? Does that bear out? Yes, a lot of nods. So I think that the stat is well founded. That we see it a lot, don't we? Now you were, as you mentioned, one of the early people in the office with the Tempo. So you got to see the hiring take place.
Yes.
What was the core values that you guys put around that idea when you were hiring?
So when it was just the 4 of us, so Teresa, our president, Patrick, our CFO, Lisa as our chief revenue officer, we wanted to be really intentional about our culture and the culture that we were building from the start. So we did a full day session where we talked about that. Like, what are our core values when we're hiring people? What type of people do we want to be bringing in? And we knew it would change over time, and that would be a great thing. But the 3 core values we came back to were integrity, growth, and joy. So we're all about transparency. We love communication. That's really where integrity came in. Growth was we wanted it to be a place where people could come in and grow and move around into different roles, but always felt like they had a place to continue to grow. And joy was one that we talked a lot about, that at the end of the day, this is a basketball team, it's entertainment. And in a world where there's a lot of bad news right now, really our goal is to make people have fun and to inspire them, whether that's on the court through the game or off the court through our community. So that's one thing that we've continued, hopefully, to continue to bring. Even in interviews, we'll often ask people about those different values. And so especially the joy one's really important to us.
Yeah, so it's a big team now. So what did you say the size of the team is about now?
I think of it yesterday, we're about 50.
50, yeah. What have been the highlights of this job for you so far, and how wide a skill set have you found that you've needed in this role?
I mean, there's been so many. I've been in this role for a year and 7 months, which is a little bit crazy considering we only got players last week. So when I joined, it was a little bit of like, what are we marketing for the first year and a half? And so at the start, we really focused on our ownership group. So when I had my final interview with Larry Tenenbaum, he told me that he wanted to carve out a big part of the cap table for interesting women from different backgrounds to join the ownership table. And I absolutely loved that. So as a marketer, I leaned into that since we didn't have players. So we announced Serena Williams and Lily Singh and Sukhinder Singh Cassidy and Ritu Gupta, and just this amazing group of women who all bring different backgrounds and different opportunities to the team. So, I mean, that was a huge highlight. A big focus was community. So I had mentioned this to Rachel, but when I was first hired, they were actually like, oh, is it a chief marketing officer role or is it a chief community role? And I love that because community is at the heart of everything we do. We're nothing without our community. So we've been hosting lots of events for our community, really building those relationships across the country. So those have been kind of nice things. And then I'd say in terms of my team, we oversee a big breadth. So we have social and content and digital. We have PR and comms. I also, which I have no business doing, but I oversee merchandising. So when I joined, they're like, yep, so you're going to launch our new merchandise line. And I knew nothing, so I'm happy they took a chance on me for that because I've been learning a lot. We're hiring mascots, a dance team, like all sorts of things that I never thought I'd be doing, but it's a lot of fun.
You've never had a hand in merchandise yet. I think that jersey sold out.
Jersey sold out in 3 minutes, so I guess I'm doing okay.
Like she's doing
it's
okay.
Actually, and back on sale today.
She glossed over that piece where Serena Williams was mentioned there. I don't know if you guys heard that. Serena Williams is one of the ownerships on the team.
It's like embarrassing to say, but Serena's been, I mean, who doesn't love Serena? But I had a picture of her up in like the basement of my house because we have a little gym down there. So I've had like a picture of her. And so when they announced her as an owner, they're like, hey, like you need to go to her house and film with her this video. And I remember almost being like, no, I don't want to. Like, I was like, I need to be cool, and I don't know if I can be around her. But she's so lovely and so great, and she made it really easy. So.
Yeah, I'm sure someone else would have put up their hand, so I'm glad you jumped at that opportunity. You've had the rare opportunity here, and people that work in sports could probably go their whole career and never get this opportunity to build a team and a brand from scratch. And so you guys get to put your fingerprints on it. You get to start everything from the name to the team colors to all of that. What has that opportunity been like?
I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. So it can definitely feel daunting at times. And there's a lot of pressure. I mean, it's the first WNBA team in the country. So with that comes a lot of pressure, and you want people to like it and to be proud of it. At the same time, there's so much opportunity. So everything when we came in, like I remember my first week and I was like, this is way more startup-y than this Series A startup I just came from. We didn't have tools or templates, we didn't have people. So we were figuring out everything from the start. And I think it's not for everyone. for sure. Lots of obstacles, but I kind of love that and I embraced it and we figured it out as we went. And we had support too. When I joined, we had this amazing community council made up of interesting people from different walks of life, different communities. So when we had ideas around the team name or colors or logos or things we were thinking, we would bounce the ideas off of them and they were all extremely helpful.
Yeah, the brand was obviously such big news here, right? When you came out with the Tempo
It
brand.
actually got leaked and came out before we were ready. But the fact that whether people originally loved it or they hated it, there was so much engagement around it because people really cared.
Yeah, for the audience, they actually submitted. They had fan submissions, and how many?
So yeah, we did a campaign called nameyourteam.ca where anyone could submit. It could be a name, a logo, an idea, a color, a feeling. And we had over 10,000 submissions from 98 countries. So it was meant for Canadians, but everyone just wants to be a part of it. Yeah, and the nice thing about it was you could submit through text or online. And I think normally if you put just like an open box on the internet, it's a scary thing.
Yeah.
You're asking for a lot. But 99% of the submissions were really positive and really amazing.
Do you think that has to do with women's sports? I mean, in some, I guess, facets of sport, maybe we wouldn't have seen that sort of positivity, but new brand, new sport, women's sports.
Yeah, we love the community that we've cultivated, and I'm sure it will change over time as we grow our social following and more trolls get in there. But we've been really intentional about creating a safe, inclusive, positive space, and been pretty vocal that like we do not have a place for harassment, racism, sexism, like anything. And we stick to that. So I'm hoping that comes across.
Can we talk a little bit more about that inclusivity piece and how intentional you guys were about not only just setting it with staff, but also setting it in your community with your partnerships, how that extended through? It's a through line in a lot of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Like obviously we haven't had players, and a lot of times like you have to make your code of conduct and how you want fans to behave. And we're like, oh, we just don't want this to be some like legal jargon that we put on our website. So we thought, how can we really be intentional about this? So we enlisted the help of Toronto's first youth poet laureate, Shahada Jack. She's incredible. If you haven't heard of her, you should look her up. And she helped us write our fan code of conduct. It's a pledge. And then she performed it live. We filmed it and put it up on our website. And then we've asked our fans to sign this pledge. And then we've also made donations to different community groups for every person that signs the pledge. And she'll be performing it live at our home opener, which is really exciting. So yeah, we try to bring that intentionality, that feeling of belonging into everything that we do.
Yeah, isn't it in some of the campaigns too, right? Some of the partnerships that you have?
Yeah, so Sephora has been Sephora and CIBC were our first founding partners. Sephora is all about we belong to something beautiful, and they have come together for Together We Win is the community platform where we celebrate all of these different moments. CIBC has been another amazing partner where we're talking about like ambitions of people and those who have paved the way for this team. Like, yes, we're so happy to be here, but we need to acknowledge that we're only here because of all the work all of these people did to get us here.
Yeah. What is the sense, I know you and I chatted a little bit about being the first people in these jobs. A lot of people wanted to work for the Tempo. And you guys are the first, you're blazing the trail in these roles. How do you all feel about that? And I guess what is the sense of responsibility of, first WNBA franchise outside of the US? And obviously it's something that there's a lot of eyeballs on here in this big sports market.
Yeah, I would say none of us take it lightly. We all feel, I think anyone that's working at the Tempo is so passionate, and that came through in all of their interviews. So yeah, I would say we all feel like really honored. We take it very seriously. We know this is a really big moment, so we don't want to mess it up. There's definitely pressure that comes with it. Another nice thing that we've talked a lot about is not only is this a moment now where young girls can see, it's like the see it to believe it. It's like, okay, now there's a pathway to stay in the country and play professional basketball. But apart from those roles, now we're creating all these other roles within the ecosystem. So it's like, now you could work in marketing for the Tempo. Now you can work in finance. You could work in basketball operations. Now Carly Clark just got named as one of our assistant coaches. She's been an amazing coach in Canada, coached for the national team. She was coaching at TMU, and now she's with our team. Referees. like there's so many now different opportunities and pathways that didn't exist before. So we definitely don't take it lightly, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to create more pathways and opportunities.
Talk about the popularity that you've noticed, whether it's the job postings and just how many resumes, like maybe you can give some anecdotes about, where you've noticed that popularity in whether it's working for or just being around and being part of the community of the Tempo that's building here.
Yeah, I knew it would be popular, but I've been overwhelmed. We posted an intern role last week for a marketing intern. We had 2,000 applicants in the first 2 days, it makes it hard too because there's so much good talent out there. Like I mentioned, our jersey sold out in 3 minutes. Our season ticket membership sold out very fast. So it's incredible. And it shows you how powerful women's sports is. It's not a charity case. It's competitive and these athletes are incredible. But yeah, it's a lot of demand.
Let's go in a little bit further into that idea. You mentioned, we're not a charity. And I know covering women's sports over the year, there sometimes can be a lot of, nice talk about, wouldn't it be nice if we had an ad for women's sport or wouldn't we invest a little money in that? And that whole thinking and messaging seems to have shifted where it's not about necessarily doing something nice. It is women's sport is good business. And I hear it time and time again when I'm writing stories and interviewing people. What do you think about that?
Well, I love you said that line because within our brand manifesto, that is our vision, or one of our mission statements is to prove that women's sports is good business, because it is. And to your point, a lot of times people historically talked about it as like, oh yeah, if we're sponsoring a men's team, it'd be nice to maybe look at the women's team, and they consider it more of a charity. But now you look at the numbers from broadcast and how many people are watching NCAA women's compared to men's, and all these new broadcast deals and this incredible athletes coming out, this new CBA deal that just got signed. And it's not a charity. It's a viable revenue model, and we want to be profitable. That's definitely our goal. So I think hopefully we can continue to drive that and just show how impactful it can be.
Yeah, what do you think that new CBA says about the place of women's basketball? That in the collective bargaining agreement that they just negotiated, it's a transformative new deal where WNBA players have been arguing for a long time that they deserve more money, and they fought tooth and nail for it this year. The players' union fought for it, and they're going to be making a lot more money this year. They're going to be getting into a revenue sharing type of thing. What does that say, I guess, about, how does that help you in the women's sports is just good business?
I think that even proves that point. The fact that now we have these supermax contracts, the players are making on average 5 times what they were making before. So it's been nice watching these interviews with the icons from the past, like the Diana Taurasi and Lisa Leslie, and they're so excited that this is the new bar that's been set, and it's only forward from here, but it just proves to the popularity and how incredible this league has been.
What do we have to look forward to this summer? Just give us a little, I guess, a sneak peek at what we've got coming.
So much to look forward to. So we tip off May 8th, but even before that, next week on Tuesday, if anyone's available, we're hosting an event called Before the Bounce. So Coca-Cola will be our main home arena. We're inviting fans in to come. We're going to unveil the court for the first time. We're going to have our dance pack there performing. We're going to do a panel with Sandy Brundello, our coach, Monica Wright-Rogers, our GM, and then Teresa Resch, our president, just talking about what's to come for the season. And then the season, we're going to get into it. So it's going to be really exciting. We'll also be playing 2 home games in Montreal and 2 in Vancouver, because it's really important to us to show up as Canada's team. And I'm sure we'll be doing tons of community events. So yeah, if you keep an eye on our social, we'll keep you updated there.
Yeah, the team is getting taken across Canada. It's very unique, really.
It is, yeah. That was another thing that Larry was really intentional about when he, bought the team. He was like, it's the Toronto Tempo. This is obviously our home base, but there's never been a team here before, so he wanted it to really be for all of Canada. And one insight that I love is the W is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. They just came out with their campaign yesterday. So there's been fans in the W the whole time in Canada. Like, I love Lisa Leslie. When I was little, I had a poster of her on my wall. But we've never been able to cheer for our own team. So it's important to us, and I think that'll come across in a lot of our campaigns and our merchandise, that we're really trying to appeal to the whole country. And that's why, even though we're not making it easy on ourselves by having 4 home arenas, but we will play in Vancouver and Montreal, and then also at Scotiabank for some games.
As a marketer, what is it like to finally have some players, with more coming each day? So there's also free agency, which is ongoing, as Teresa is actively out there talking to players right now, active players. And there will be a draft also on Monday where college talent will come in. What is it like to finally have players?
It's incredible. Like I said, I had a year and 7 months with no players. So on Friday, we had our expansion draft, and Rachel was actually there witnessing it live. And it was kind of surreal. Like, when they sent out the first name, like, we select, I was like, oh my God, it's like real. And then we got to mock them up in jerseys for the first time. And now starting to learn the stories of these players, I've become so invested already. But it's really special. And some of them are going to start arriving in town, we've heard, later this week. And so that will feel really cool too, to physically have them here.
Yeah, on Friday, the Tempo held a media press conference, but also there were members of Tempo staff in-house, and it was, up in a big sort of conference room type setting, watching the draft on television. And so the picks were coming in on television, and it was the first time that we've had, certainly there have been the hiring of the general manager and the hiring of the coach, but it was the first time that we got to kind of like be inside the building of this team, and to see 11 players chosen that day. You can start to imagine, to put some questions to the general manager and the assistant general manager about what this is going to look like. So how did that feel for you that day?
It was great. We wanted the team, or like all of the media, really to feel like part of it and to kind of get a behind the scenes look at it. So the actual draft was happening in our office a couple floors below. And then a half hour, we just followed it really quickly with the press conference. But it was really, it was Friday of a long weekend. When we found out that was the expansion draft date, I was like, oof, I don't know if anyone's going to show up, because this happened, I think it was at 4:00. And it was packed. Like, there was tons of people there. So again, it just shows the excitement people have for this team.
What would you say, from your experience working with the Tempo, what advice would you give somebody who might be thinking of making a similar move that you did, coming from an industry that wasn't sport, but interested, maybe they had their own personal sport background themselves, or like what would you say about what it's been like for you, and maybe some advice?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love this pun, but I always say, like, shoot your shot. There's people that are working for our team now, multiple people who sent me a DM on Instagram, which I'm not condoning. I'm not saying that's the best idea, but they sent me a note when I first started, just saying how passionate they were about the space and how much they'd love to work for the team. And even if it didn't work out at that moment, like a year later, something came up and I was like, oh yeah, there's that person. And they would come and maybe be a photographer for an event or come to one of our press conferences. Now they're working for the team. So I think there's just going to continue to be more and more opportunities, whether it's with the Tempo or the Northern Super League or the PWHL. Like, it's so exciting that now there's all these professional women's leagues across the country and more opportunities. So yeah, I'd say just trying to get a foot in the door, whether it's like a contact of a contact, get your resume seen, and show up to events. That's a great way that I often meet people.
Yeah, I can't believe the difference from even 3 years ago, I guess. There was a conference here in Toronto, ESPNW, has a huge women's sport conference, and it was just like the talk was all about what was about to bud, that the Professional Women's Hockey League was just about to start, and there was a buzz at the time that maybe there would be soccer, but I think the WNBA was almost like a distant, like nobody could imagine it at that point until it was announced that, wow, this team is coming. And the excitement has really just grown and grown. Like, how would you describe what the excitement's been like?
It's been amazing. And the nice thing, too, on the other women's teams is I think some people might think, oh, it's like more competition for like revenue dollars and things like that. But the teams have been so supportive of one another. We talked to Diana Matheson at NSL and Jana and Amy Shearer at the PWHL like all the time. And it's really nice to see how the women's teams are all supporting each other and saying like, hey, what do you need? Like, this is what I've learned. Like, how can I help you out? And so to see all these leagues continue to grow, and like there's been new expansion teams announced for the PWHL, there's more coming for the NSL. It's incredible.
How have the women helped each other in terms of sharing ideas, like either marketing ideas or the Toronto Scepters are in the building where you're going to be? Has there been learning there or from WNBA, other WNBA teams?
Oh yeah, I'd say both. So in terms of WNBA, the Golden State Valkyries were the expansion team the year before us. So as soon as I joined, the head of marketing from Golden State became like my best friend. And I was surprised because I didn't know how collaborative it would be. You know, it's like we're competing against each other. But because we have different marketing territories, the teams have been incredible. And it's like we all just get better if each team succeeds. So yes, we'll be competitive on the court. We want to beat each other. But off the court, it's been great. And then in terms of the other teams, yeah, like the Scepters, they play at Coca-Cola. So just navigating that building and how things work and game presentation, they're incredible. We send our, we've invited their athletes to our home opener. They invite us to their games. They're always, honestly, like Diana called Teresa a few weeks ago and was just like, this is kind of like the point we were at right before we launched, and this is how we were feeling. Just to, I think, make Teresa feel like better about just like how much pressure and how crazy it is right now.
Yeah. How do you describe, I guess, the feeling of what you guys are at the 30-day mark? Still a lot to do, I'm sure, but how do you view the to-do list and put it all in place at this moment?
Yeah, I say like we're in like survival mode right now. We're taking it day by day, and it's a lot, but yeah, we have these kind of pep talks each day where we're like, it's crazy and we're working around the clock right now, but it's so worth it, and we never get this time back again. Like we are never going to have an expansion draft again. We're never going to have our inaugural home opener. I went to watch the Raptors 30th documentary last year, and watching it made me emotional because I'm like, that's going to be us, and that's going to be a historic time. And we don't realize it right now, but just take a moment and pause and let it sink in.
Will you take a moment for yourself, do you think, that
I
first
hope
game?
so. I think about it, and like there's going to be so much going on, but yeah, I'm hopeful. It's kind of like your wedding day where people are like, make sure it goes by so fast, just like take a beat and take it in. So I do hope there's one moment that night that I can kind of just take a second and embrace it all.
Thank you for sharing with us. I think it's a really exciting time. I know it's going to be, we have a World Cup here this summer, but I think that is also a massive sporting event here in the summer that everybody is just keyed into is to have those home games and also a couple games at Scotia and then those games across the country. But I think everyone will be glued to the team.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, hope to see lots of you at games and our events.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Actually, I have a quick Question for you, Rachel.
Sure.
You've covered sports here for a long time. Yeah. What's it like for you to see this happen?
Yeah, I've seen so much of this over the last couple of years. I watched the PWHL come to life. There used to be, if I was going to cover women's sports, it was going to be at an Olympic Games, at a World Championships, or in Canada, it was going to be golf or tennis. And that was the extent of me getting to cover women's sports. Now I think you could almost cover it every day in Toronto alone. As of this summer, it's going to be like that. So seeing, and for years, I think you hear a lot of what if, and then people say that'll never happen. And I think this was one of them that was like, that won't, why Toronto, And now it became pretty clear that this was a pretty good market for it. Yeah.
Well, as you leave the stage, I'm wondering how many of you will be watching on May 8th, which is opening day. You guys can go.
Cheers.
Yeah. May 8th is Toronto Tempo's opening day. I would almost say, does Whitney have tickets for people? She doesn't. There are none. But please, you can watch by watching on TV and help their ratings and stuff too, right? And reading Rachel's story when it's done. So thanks, ladies. Thank you so much. We are almost done. This is it, friends. We had a good day. Very full day. The sun is out. thankfully. I don't know if it's warm yet, still not Barbados warm, but I'll take it. We heard a few things today. We heard that equity doesn't happen by accident. It's built intentionally through leadership choices, organizational cultures, and sustained commitments. We also heard that health, well-being, and support systems matter. The systems need to matter and need to be done for long-term impact. We heard that sharing lessons across generations helps open doors wider. Mentorship is important, old and young. And we were also reminded that firsts matter, whether it's launching a new basketball team, as the Toronto Temple will be launching, creating new opportunities, or changing what leadership looks like in industries where women haven't always been centered. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to you. You guys were a fantastic audience. I was sitting in different spots, and you were engaged essentially the entire time. And also, kudos for that is to Lisa in the back, Jennifer on the side, and Andrea. If we can give them another, and the sound team, and the video, and all of the people. Thank you so much. In a moment, you're going to see a QR code on the screen. You can take a moment to scan it. You can always bring your feedback, good and bad, to help these events happen, improve them, or for next year. And for those of us in person, I remind you there's networking still to come. There's still vendors out there as well. And so finally, on behalf of the Globe and Mail, thank you again for joining us for Women Lead Here 2026, Driving Equity in the Workplace. For those of you who are winners in this room, and many of you are, I'd like to invite you to come up for a group photo. There are two photos. One is for the Women Lead Here, there's two photos, sorry. One is for Canada's top growing led companies, and the other one is for the Women Lead Here list. You should know who you are, and you can come and take photos up here. And thanks for being so amazing. I hope you have a fantastic day. Enjoy the sun. My name is Dio Kafense. You can find me at dio.ca. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day.